Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator. Come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have James Parris. Welcome.
Hello.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is James Parris. I'm what you would refer to as a multi-hyphenate filmmaker. Means on any given day, I could be a writer, director, animation, VFX, storyboard, DP. I wear a lot of hats.
All the things. All right, so you grew up in New York City. What part of New York City, and what was it like growing up? Like, what's your origin story?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Queens, New York. I grew up in a little neighborhood that is probably more famous for producing rappers than anything. I grew up in Hollis, Queens. We gave the world like Run DMC, LL Cool J, Ja Rule,
Nice.
Q-Tip. As a matter of fact, I think I'm the only person in my neighborhood who did not become a rapper. But I was instead I was a little geek in the corner with a sketchbook all the time. My inner life was my life. I was, I'm not shy today, but I was much shyer as a kid,
Right.
and drawing was my way out. And I made lots of worlds that I wanted to live in my sketchbooks. And that's who I was. Luckily, I was in New York, so that actually, I at least this is back in the 80s.
Right.
So print was like the way that you thought that an artist was ever going to get to be an artist. It's like, oh, maybe you're going to be good enough as an illustrator to make a book cover or something like that, So that was like sort of as a kid, like maybe I could be good enough one day to make imaginary worlds that other people could read in a book.
Yeah. Like I've interviewed a lot of people from New York City. Is it the same for you, where some of them were like nerds, but they were still accepted because just New York City was just a different place, or did you have a different experience?
Yeah, that was interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so I had like different worlds that I lived in at the same time. So in my neighborhood in Hollis, this is like at the birth of hip hop, the end of disco, beginning of hip hop, in terms of like put yourself in that era, late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
That's Ormond, where you still had big block parties and stuff like that.
Nice.
So there were parts of my neighborhood where I was ostracized because I wasn't hip enough. I wasn't, I was just this, I didn't quite get how to be popular at the beginning of this journey.
Yeah.
But then I had neighbors and friends who were close, like friends of family. Like I grew up in one of those neighborhoods where everybody knows your mama.
Right.
And so the kids or the people who knew my mama, their kids were like, "Oh no, we know him. He's different, but he's a good guy."
Yeah.
And then sometimes you make pictures for them, like, "Oh look, I'm gonna make a little comic book for you." And so.
Right.
So I had my little thing, kind of like Stranger Things, like how they were like not quite like everybody else, but they had each other.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm like one of those guys in Stranger Things.
Nice.
So it was okay. Eventually, I did figure out the hack to how to live both in my own imaginary space and then also learn how to communicate properly with everybody outside of my imagination. It took a little bit.
I feel like because my original self was very quiet as well. But do you have any tips? Because like people are like probably trying to figure it out. Maybe kids are trying to figure it out. So what was your hack? I guess?
Sure. Yeah. There were a few hacks. Definitely a few hacks. Like at first I used to think that, oh man, if I don't have this natural immediate charisma with everybody, that because I had friends who would just. They open their mouth and they always say the right thing, and so I figured if I couldn't do that, I would never really be able to, do that thing that they do, that magic social thing.
Right.
And then after I started, then you get rejected by this group, by that group, and then I ended up during my grade and junior high school years or middle school, busing from a black neighborhood to a white neighborhood for school. So like during the day I was in a black neighborhood, at home and after school I'm in a black neighborhood, but during school hours I'm in a completely white. I'm like the only chip in the cookie kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's even more chances for me to not fit in. You know what I mean? But what that ended up doing for me is now you have like 7 different like ecosystems, none of which I fit in, but I started observing and seeing what like what are the rules of that group? What are the rules of that group? Why do they accept theirs? And then I started realizing these are just behaviors. And if you do certain behaviors, they see you as one of their own. And so one by one, I started just as a little game for myself, learning, let me mimic the behavior of those people, right?
Yeah.
And see how naturally I can just do it, even though I'm faking it.
Yeah.
But what's a weird thing is, like, when you start faking something, you actually start believing the thing you're faking. You know what I mean? And so, I can fit in with these people now because I can do like they do, be interested in the things they're interested in. And it turns out I'm actually interested in all these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So by forcing, like, by making myself fake the role of being just like them, I learn what it's like to be just like them. And which ended up being a skill set that I didn't realize I needed later on, because this is gonna, as an animator, that's one of those things that actually does really help. Putting yourself in the shoes of a character, and basically, there's a word for that. It's called acting. You know what I mean? But real actors, method guys, they know, like, okay, put yourself actually in the shoes. So I ended up learning that I could put myself in the shoes of just about anybody in any group, and I can fit in with that group, which was later, especially during later high school years, turns out that's the skeleton key for popularity. Is like, oh, I already know that group because I practice being you. Okay, so now in a brand new school, I can walk in and identify all the groups, and then I just put on this face for you, put on that face for you. You know what I mean? Some people would say, well, then you're not really being yourself. I remember once I was, this is later on in a workplace, and one of my coworkers said, he observed me talking to like 5 different people in 5 different voices. And he says, oh, I heard you do all these things, like who is the real you? And it's like, they're all the real me. I just have learned how to live in a multipolar world, and that was my survival hack.
That makes me think of the BuzzFeed video with what's her name? She was an actress in Hentified. Jaleesa, I think her name is, and there was like a video that they did at BuzzFeed where she was posted, because she's Afro-Latina, and so she was talking to the black girl this way, and then the white guy, and then in Spanish to her, Latino people, and it's just like,
she was modulating, like a lot of people. We're mammals, right? We want to hear the sounds of our species, you know what I mean, and whatever we think our species is. I think we have one species. It's human. It's Homo sapiens. However, culturally, you can develop comfort zones, right? And so I think a benefit of growing up outside of everybody's comfort zone actually made it easier for me later on to go into everybody's comfort zone, because I never got attached to one culture. Every club kicked me out, so I didn't get any like comfort zone to begin with. But then when I realized I could get back into everybody's club just by doing the right passwords. It also just let me
up, down, left, right, AB.
Right. But also taught me a great lesson that I need to be able to be okay by myself. I need to be able to be okay without being in your clique, without what's my real, why do I love myself? Why am I valuable? And luckily for me, that anchor was always in, because I make stories with pictures. That's who I am. That's my true identity,
I feel like some of that, this year is my 20-year high school reunion, and
nice.
I don't feel like going back, because I feel like I'll be reliving high school. Because I already got a peek of it. Back in 2011, I used to play basketball, and there was like old school versus new school.
Yes.
And it was like me reliving my senior year on the basketball team, where my coach ignored me and paid attention to the juniors. So I was like, and this is like a big, I'm good. I see y'all on Facebook.
That's funny.
But another thing that you said, once you get in, I'm sure it removes preconceived notions, because for anybody who watches The Circle, there's like, are you familiar with that show?
I know a little bit. I've actually never seen it myself, but I've heard.
So the concept is like everybody's in their individual apartments, and they're playing this like social media game where at the end, if you make it through all the eliminations and like people voting you out, you can get money. But it's like a social experiment where you're like trying to create alliances, or maybe like the Indian dude, he was like, I'm not creating an alliance with anybody. He was like 2nd or 3rd place in like season 2 or whatever. But for me, I can tell because the way it's set up when they introduce the people, they like walk down this hallway, and I can tell by how they look walking down the hallway whether they're going to be a catfish or they're going to come as themselves. And it's always the nerdy people that catfish, and they always catfish as hot people, and then they are weird because they think hot people are like this. And
they have a stereotype that they play.
And it's like it always falls flat because you're making this stereotype about these human beings that don't act like, even if they are possibly mean or whatever, they don't behave like what you're doing. Right. And it always is like, what is wrong with this?
Yeah, character? And I think like for me at least, my experience, one of the key components to getting into any club, you have to listen to them first. Yeah. You can't just play the role of what you think they are, and then because people love to be listened to. People love to be heard, right? So you can say a few things and do a few behaviors that just let you in their force field, right? Yeah. But once you're in their force field, you got to listen to what this guy likes, what this guy reacted negatively to. And one of the things people love with is being agreed with. You know, they love being agreed with just in general. So people love, once this guy has a strong opinion over here, you're like, exactly, because And he's like, yeah, see, he's with me. Before you know it, you know, like people are like, that guy just agreed with me and took my side. I like him, you know. And when you're younger, it's something as simple as that could make somebody really, really like keep you in the safe zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And with the listening piece, I know that people say like, when they tell you like networking skills, that like if you just listen to somebody, the other person will walk away from the conversation like, oh man, that person was very interesting, even though you didn't say anything. You just listened to the other person.
Even if you just play the role of somebody who's interested in them. But a lot of people don't want to even do that. A lot of people don't even want to put forth the effort of faking interest. You know what I mean? And I've learned that's a really, like, just in work, you know, on the job. Sometimes that's a very important survival skill. Yeah. You have a superior who just needs to be heard. Yeah. You know, sometimes you're like,
you know. Because I told my like ex-boyfriend about like, there's certain topics in the animation industry where I'm just like, I'm out. But if we're in a networking event, you're never going to know that I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Right. And so the first time we went to a networking event together, he was like, you are very good at that. I was like, I don't have to tell them I hate this thing. Or
yes,
I don't even have to hate it. I just don't like it. I just don't want it. So
and another thing I learned, and also a very important skill, is all the muscles in your face are under your control. You know, one of the things my mom taught me, like when I was really young, you know how it is when you get introduced to like adults and meet this person, and you don't care. You're trying to go play or do something, right? Come over here and say hi to blah blah blah, and I don't want to. So what I would do is I would telegraph that I'm not interested. You know what I mean? I'd be like, say hi, say hello, and hi. You know, and then just look away, right? And then later my mom would take me and say, you can't just smile like for half a second and then go to that I don't care face. They can see that. They can see it plainly. If you're going to fake it, keep your smile up until you're out of range and then let it down, you know? Yeah. And she was very frustrated, but part of me was like, well, stop introducing me to people then. But there was actually not a bad piece of advice that like, oh yeah, my smile, you know, these are what you call the zygomatic major, these muscles that pull up the sides of your mouth, and then these ocularis muscles up here. That's what we read when we say, oh, is this person generally enjoying being around me? You know what I mean? So even if you don't feel it, you can control those muscles. Like, hey, how you doing? You know, and then blah, blah, blah. And just keep that up until you're out of range, and then you can let it down.
Like, I feel like sometimes, as a Virgo, I sometimes cannot control my facial expressions. I feel like, and I'm trying to work on it. But I was at an event recently, and it was kind of interesting because I didn't really talk to people while I was there. It was like a totally, like, I'm in one of the Black Greek sororities, and so it was like a Black fraternity event. Okay. And so I didn't really talk to people while I was there. And then I'm leaving and I see some people, and they're actually end up being from Detroit like me. So I'm like, okay, this is the most interesting conversation I've had all night, is me leaving. Nice. But one of the guys was like, yeah, you didn't look like you were enjoying yourself. I was like, damn it. Like, I was trying. And he's like, no, you didn't look mean. You just didn't look like you were enjoying
it looked like you would rather be watching TV at home.
And I was like, that is very accurate.
Yes, and so that's what I like now in my modern adult life. Well, I've been an adult for a long time now. But I just turned 55, so I guess I've been an adult for at least 35 years, whatever. But
congratulations.
But I'm finally getting it. I'm finally getting it. Is the more you do it, the harder. I mean, the less difficult it is to control what everybody sees on your face, the more you put some effort into it. And then it's not that big of a hassle if I got to go to a mixer and party and I forgot that I had to do this. And like, okay, fine. Just come on, be hospitable, be whatever. And then it's like, oh, it's not going to kill you to look engaged for a second. You know what I mean?
I feel like what you just said is an important piece because like being 55, like I know when people are in their 20s, like I feel like the 20s was like realizing that nobody knows what they're doing. You're in your adolescence and you're like, okay, these are adults, so obviously, and then you're in your 20s and you're like, oh, we're all winging it.
I call it being a teen with a budget. Is 20s. You know what I mean?
I like when people say, if they're like 20 years old, I'm a teenager with 2 years experience or like something like that.
Right.
They say, like, we only have this many years experience being an adult.
Yes. Now, to be fair, my 20s were probably atypical because I got a real big lucky break. I don't know if you want me to go into that yet, but because the artist part of me was also growing while the person who was trying to fit in with everybody, and like, I want to be popular, like, because, when you're deprived of something, that's all you want after you've been denied it so long. So when I got into high school, I was like, no, I got to be popular. I'm going to run for president. I'm going to like do all the things that I never got to do when I was in Stranger Things, but now I'm like, I'm into Get Down, different show. This is the new me. Right. Also, I had a growth spurt around that time. And so I went from like a short, stubby kid to I can play basketball now, I was like literally the manifestation of like, what was that, Skilo? I wish I was a little bit taller. I'm like, oh, it came true. And now I'm playing basketball. So
did you get Impala?
just everything except the Impala. I was in New York, so we take subway.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Nobody drives. I lucked out because there is a high school in New York that catered to weirdos like me and gave us like a reason for existing. And that high school is called the High School of Art and Design. So I ended up attending art and design high school in Manhattan. And for the first time, it was literally like, the X-Men, when you like realize like there's a special school for people like you, you know what I mean? And it felt really, really empowering. I mean, you still had all the cliques and everything in high school, but the one common denominator for the first time in my life, the thing that was my private little thing, that was my escape, ended up being something you were respected for openly in society. Like this entire high school respects drawing, painting, photography, graphic design, and all of that, So, and I'm going in at the beginning of the 80s. So now hip hop is just starting to take off in New York. So we see this explode. So graffiti art became part of the social, and I realized, oh my God, this is my way in. Like what I adopted graffiti as part of one of my languages, and then you can like do graffiti art on your jacket and wear. So you're walking around wearing your portfolio on your back, and that gave me like, oh wow, this is kind of like this. Okay, popularity. It feels kind of good. It kind of feels good sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when I went into college, I ended up getting much more serious about popularity is nice, but do you want to get paid? Because that's not going to pay you, that thing, you know what I mean? And so you're going to have to get into your craft. And so that's what ended up happening when I left high school. The biggest transition was I now know who I am. I'm a storyteller. I tell stories with pictures. Now, how am I going to tell the whole world that I am that, And so anyway, but that was the funniest thing that happened getting me into my 20s was I went to art school in Brooklyn. Pratt is the name of the college I went to, Pratt Institute. And I had an advisor at school who said, you know what, you really are good at figure drawing the human figure, right? And I suggest you submit, there's this internship at a tiny little animation studio that they're opening for people who are into, you know, hand-drawn animation. And I was like, well, I don't do animation. I'm a serious, like, at this point, I'm like, I want to have my painting hanging in the Smithsonian, you know, like that's where I'm at, right? I went from I want to be popular to I want to be the best with a pencil or a paintbrush, you know, in the world. And she's like, yeah, just submit it anyway. So I just took a bunch of my sketchbooks and I submitted it to this tiny little animation studio that nobody ever heard of called Walt Disney Feature Animation. And and to my absolute surprise, they're like, yes, we want you to come intern with us in animation. And I was like, really? Okay. But that's if you want to talk about every life has a game-changing event, right. a world-changing, like, oh, this is where the reality branches off, you know, like Loki into like the other, you know, the sacred timeline. That is the one event that put me into the sacred timeline, you know what I mean? And I went, this is the summer of 1990. And Disney was in production on a film called The Rescuers Down Under. I always like to say it's the film that nobody saw in between Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. You know,
Rescuers Down Under is big to me. Shoot.
Oh, really? Did you see? Okay.
I got because usually people VHS tapes in there.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. And so they were in production, and then I learned. Not only did I fall in love with animation, I fell in love with cinema. I fell in love with film. I just fell in love with the idea that, oh, moving pictures. I get it now. Like I always loved going to the movies, but I never made the connection between there are people who craft these things. The movies don't just come out of a factory. You know what I mean? I mean, it is a factory, but factory with people in it, right? You know. And so I learned that my drawings can turn into actors. You know, and that was the biggest, oh my gosh. Like, it was like, I realized, oh, you had magic in you all along. I was Harry Potter all this time and I didn't know it, you know? And so I came out of that internship really on a mission. And my mission was, okay, now I realize not only am I a storyteller with still unmoving pictures, I am a storyteller with moving pictures. And I ended up getting hired back. I stayed with Disney for the rest of that decade. And that decade that I worked at Disney Animation, we're probably going to be the last generation of, you know, flipping paper with pencil animation, you know, and so that's just, exactly. Luckily for me, I was able to work on 4 features with them. So, yeah.
Nice. So, back to being cool.
Yes.
I feel like, so I went to my university was Rochester Institute of Technology and Upstate. Oh,
yeah.
And so what I realized going to RIT was, because it's an institute of technology, so everybody's smart. It was like, oh, and then there were cool people.
Yes.
Because I'm like, oh, we're
the cool smart.
Right. I'm like, oh, like everybody is a nerd.
Yes.
It's just some people get it better.
Yes. It's no longer stand out for this one thing. Like like the same thing for me. Like no longer stand out for your art. Everybody's an artist. Like for you, everybody's smart, right? Everybody's like, so you have to now find the cool within the cool, you know.
And then I just finished Love Is Blind UK, and you can see beautiful people have insecurities too. Like,
of course.
Like everybody has insecurities. I feel like
human beings,
we just kind of go through life where it's like, oh, well, that person is beautiful or hot or a model look, and they're all right. I've learned models are some of the probably weirdest people.
Without a doubt, and it's probably not by accident. I mean, we live in a system. You know, I could probably boil it all down to like false scarcity, if you've ever heard that term. You know, it's a tenet of capitalism. You know, if you want to get a lot of people to fight over one thing, convince them all that there's only one thing. If there's only one cookie, then they're going to fight over the cookie, even if there's 12 cookies over here that I'm hoarding. Right. But instead of cookies, just replace it with acceptance, popularity, love, all of that. If you convince everybody there's only this much around that can go around, so only a few people can be accepted, you know what I mean? Then you're going to fight over those crumbs of acceptance, right?
Or give up.
Or give up and say, I just lost the game and I'll never be able to be accepted by anybody. I'm just going to be a hermit. And then you embrace the hermit life, right? You know what I mean? Like musical chairs. Like we all played this as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about the lesson of musical chairs. It's I don't know if I like musical chairs. It's false scarcity as a game. It's like you have like X amount of chairs, but you have more people than chairs, right? So what's the first lesson you're getting? Is like there's not enough for everybody. somebody's gonna have to lose, and that person, your job is to not feel bad for them. If you are lucky enough and the music stops and you grab a chair, whoever's left out, you're trained to say, sucks to be you, sorry.
Man, I'm pretty sure some like psychology professor has used that as a demonstration. It has to be.
Think about it. It desensitizes you to being empathetic for the person who lost. You're just like, well, they lost because they were slow.
Desensitization, like whether it's like I remember when they first came out with like in VR with the like maybe a GTA game or something like that. Like these like people actually like physically doing the motion, like, oh no, this is too much. Like if I have a controller, then that's another thing. I could steal and like beat people up.
You can
I have to actually do the motion.
Oh my gosh.
And then like even with us being Black, like I haven't watched a video of somebody getting murdered since like Walter Scott was the first video I was like, I'm not watching. Because I don't want to normalize seeing. No,
you don't want to become desensitized to the suffering of others. You know, I'm a socialist, so like it's my mindset is exactly, we need more empathy towards all of us as the working class to like you're closer to being a homeless person than you are to being Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? And so you shouldn't look at that homeless person as like, well, it's your fault. Like, are you kidding me? You know, especially those of us who come from slaves. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I feel like a guy made a good point on Twitter where when we make excuses for rich people, not the theoretical I don't, but like,
when like, they
right, but like it's because if you think of like poor white people, it's because they're waiting for their chance to be rich so they can take advantage of the system just like them. But they don't realize how that's probably them.
Yeah, they don't want to end the unjust system. They just want to be on the winning side of the unjust system. You know, what was it, John Steinbeck? So, you know, why one of the reasons socialism didn't take in the U.S. is because most poor people don't see themselves as poor. They just see themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. You know, and any day I'm going to be a slave owner myself.
Points were made. Like, yeah, I feel like it's a huge part of American society to be so individualistic and to be all these things that would not make that.
It's musical chairs, man. It's like the real lesson of musical chairs should be, in my universe, musical chairs is played. It was only a few chairs and when the music stops, the people storm the joint and find who's holding the rest of the chairs so that everybody can have a chair. Right. You know, we don't fight each other over the two chairs that they're allowing us to fight over. We understand that somewhere behind another door, somebody's holding like a gazillion chairs, and those are rightfully ours, and let's go get it. You know? And that's why they killed Huey Newton, but that's a whole other story. Sorry, I didn't mean Huey. I meant Fred Hampton.
No. We can have so many great conversations, man. Exactly. Anyway, so what are some of your best childhood memories?
Yes, my best childhood memories that weren't referencing Fred Hampton's assassination. Well, let's see. In terms of my childhood, I mean, luckily for me, you know, this is pre-internet, obviously, because I already aged myself. So like, you know, I was around for the end of disco and the beginning of hip hop. It was a very interesting time culturally to be in New York City. You know what I mean? I like to think I got the best of both of those eras. You know what I mean? Obviously disco's waning, hip hop's being born, but also that style, fashion, art, just a lot of things were first. I got to see the birth of so much. Computers, the first, you know, those gigantic IBMs, and and then eventually the first Apple and the Apple II, and you know what I mean. And this whole idea of like, wow, computers are going to be a thing of the future, and like people are going to have computers in their life, you know. And then I got to see the movies, like I made the first computer movie. Like, remember War Games? I don't know if you've ever seen it, you know, Matthew Broderick and okay. They're like Tron. I remember Tron coming out and like, wow, that's what it would be like to be inside a computer mainframe. Wow. And so it was kind of cool. Like, I was a tech nerd for sure, you know, aside from being an artist. Science fiction became like my go-to genre because of all the explosions of different things that had not existed prior to that. You know what I mean? So being a kid who basically came of age throughout the entire decade of the 80s, And I think that's what I love about having grown up then. You know, I missed out on the 60s and all the radical action that took place, you know what I mean? Although we're getting some of that now. But because, you know, history repeating.
Right.
But that's my favorite part about the 80s, you know, like electronica as a form of music is born. All of a sudden there's synthesizers and samplers for the first time in history, you know, drum machines for the first time in history. Like, what is going on, you know? And then, of course, the movies. I mean, in my opinion, I'm a cinephile. And so there, I don't have to tell you, but I'll say it anyway. You know, at the end of the 70s, a weird thing started happening in the movie theater. You know, the end of the big Hollywood, the films that defined big Hollywood in the 50s and then going into the 60s, that was coming to an end. Hollywood was in the doldrums. Now you had things that were used to be called B movies in the 50s and 60s, science fiction things about aliens visiting or things about something in space, adventures or whatever. Those were like never taken seriously, those stories in black and white Hollywood, right? So all of a sudden right at the end of the 70s, you have guys with names you know now, but you didn't know them then. You didn't know the name Lucas. You didn't know the name Spielberg. You didn't know the name De Palma. You didn't know the name Scorsese. You didn't know the name, you know, Coppola. And all of a sudden these guys took what used to be B movies, B crime, B sci-fi, and let's treat them seriously. Right. All of a sudden Star Wars happens. I was there. Star Wars first time in the theater. I saw what happened to the world after that. You know what I mean? I was at ground zero of Star Wars. I was at ground zero of Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know, and oh my gosh, it was a beautiful time to to be a young creator and to be influenced by all these brand new things, these movements that were just getting off the ground. Right. And so it gave me a sense that everything is possible if you have enough imagination. So that's what I love the most about growing up right at that point in history, you know.
So this makes me think of a question. Because you mentioned the 60s, and I know I got a chance to watch Snooki and Pink and Blue.
Oh, my shorts.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on like Nina Simone talking about, you know, artists should like relay the sign of the times or what's going on in the world? Because I know obviously we need our like, this movie is about an owl or this movie is about clouds, but I can see in your the two shorts that I watched that it's commentary of sorts. Oh,
I see. Yeah. Well, you know, my opinion. I'm gonna make a statement. It doesn't apply to everybody in every film, you know. But I think every film kind of has a point of view, even when it's trying not to. The question is, are you owning that point of view, and are you like leaning into it, or are you just unaware that it's even happening? You know, sometimes, like, you know, when you're talking, your personality comes out even if you don't intend for it to, you know. And then there are other times where you're like, I know this is my personality, I'm selling it. You know what I mean? And so for example, in Pink and Blue, obviously there's a gender conversation happening because the toys are living in apartheid, you know, and you're not allowed to play with you, and you're not, you know. And so one of the first things is, so that animated short is not subtle at all. It's actually geared towards a younger audience, right? And the girls' toys and the boys' toys are not allowed to play together because boys only play with masculine things, girls only play with feminine things, and them is the rules, you know what I mean? Except when one of the toys disobeys and goes off the plantation and goes onto the other plantation, basically, you know, and then realizes that both of us, we're not different, really. We can play with whatever we want. So it's not really the deepest message, you know. But Pink and Blue is definitely one of those shorts that is, it's made to say one specific message, and I'm not even trying to hide it. You know what I mean? The fun of that, though, is trying to mimic the style. When I go into where the girls play, you know, stereotype, I try to mimic the style of what I grew up with as Barbie commercials and things like that. But when I go into the boys area, I try to mimic the style of storytelling that is the way we got G.I. Joe to Transformers to, you know, when there was a moment where Lego became boys only. I don't know if you remember that, but Lego used to be for everybody.
Okay.
Boys, girls, the whole family. The commercials for Lego used to be a family game, like Monopoly or whatever, right? Yeah. And then around the late 80s into the 90s, they introduced this guy named Zach. I think it was Zach, the Lego Maniac, was the kid. And he was this cool...
when I was still in single digits, so...
Yeah, see, he was this cool guy, and then it was a father-son thing. You could make rocket ships, and that was it for Lego. And then later on, Lego, like, brought out something called Lego Friends, which was just for girls, but the only thing you could make was like a salon to go to, you know, and like you're right. So they really like did their gender segregation even in Lego, you know. So that was one of the things. With Snooki, obviously, is a little bit more obvious. Is not for kids, you know. Snooki is it's a breakup, you know, and I wanted it to kind of hopefully surprise you a little bit. It's a breakup, and you think the husband is having a nervous breakdown, but then you realize he's artificial. And so the reality of his nervous breakdown is that he's starting to realize that he is programmed to be in this marriage and love her, and his programming is starting to wear thin, and she has to make the decision, either let him walk out the door or call tech support and have him fixed.
I hope this for all people, but I really hope that for Black people, like, wait, we are programmed.
Like, wait, the Matrix was actually saying something. You know what I mean? Which is one of the reasons the Matrix is always going to be in my top 10 films of all time. There are so many layers of things that can be discussed within, you know, some people say, oh, it's a trans allegory. Some people will say it's absolutely a capitalism allegory. Some people say it's a humanity race allegory. You know, I'm going to say yes, more. Yeah, there's probably more, you know.
Yeah, like for me, I've been for the past 4 or 5 years, like trying to like not live in proximity to whiteness, which in a it's more complex, but in a very basic thing is like the first Black this won this, or the first Black that's like there can't be a first Black if you don't live in proximity to whiteness. And so at the beginning of this year, I added a bunch of books to my book list of like trying to do that for like patriarchy and kind of read more books about like trans, LGBTQIA, disability, and all that type of stuff, because I just want to make sure that I'm acknowledging all these things and like, oh, I didn't realize that's possibly something I'm doing, or this is I didn't mean, okay, that's taboo, or like.
Yeah, to be respectful to anybody who's going through anything that, you know, a film I just saw, I don't know if you've seen it, I saw The TV Glow. Have you heard of it? I saw The TV Glow. It's if you watch the trailer and just only watch the trailer and take it on face value, it seems like a sci-fi thriller about like, is there something weird happening with TV programming going into people's minds or something like that. But I don't want to spoil what it's actually about. But it's definitely,
I think, better than the trailer.
There's more to talk about once you have seen the movie, so we should definitely have a conversation after you've seen it. But that's, I think, in my opinion, that's one of those that's definitely got probably even more layers than I even caught in terms of what's actually happening and what the story is talking about. But I believe that's one of the things that storytelling, that's one of the best parts of storytelling. That's why I love it so much as an art form, is I can talk about things that I wish we did better. I can talk about things that I love and hate without saying it on the nose. With, you know, you can bake that into an experience by watching a main character go through a journey of change. I mean, that's really all story is. Story is talking about how a character changes from this to that. And it could be a very small change, you know, or it could be a life-altering thing. You know, like, I don't know if you go back to, like, I don't know, even a comedy like Tootsie, way back. Hey, I'm gonna fake being a woman so I could get ahead over. You know what I mean? Or if we want to talk about blackness, I mean, this is like a campy, like cheesy as hell. But Soul Man, do you remember Soul Man?
Yes.
You know, it could be the cheesiest attempt to, you know what I mean? Or you can do something like Do the Right Thing. Not Do the Right Thing. Well, Do the Right Thing as well. But the one on campus, Spike's School Days.
Yeah, School Days.
Yeah, where literally you have Fishburne run into the camera at the end and just yell, "Wake up!" So Spike's never been known to be the most subtle type, but that's one of his that's part of being Spike,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Message.
here comes Keenan Ivory Wayans on the side, you know, message. What was that? Don't be a menace to society while drinking your juice in the hood. Is that what?
Yeah.
You know, and then also, you know, have you seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
I've heard of it.
Oh, if you're gonna see I Saw the TV Glow, do it as a double feature with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think those two would make a great, in terms of how you take sci-fi and talk about something that's not sci-fi using sci-fi. You know,
Yes.
just like my Snooki, Eternal Sunshine is about it's about a couple. It's about having problems. You know, and
I feel like with Snooki, you could be in the running to direct a Black Mirror episode.
It's funny, you like a lot of people have said that after watching Snooki. They're like, "Hey, that kind of feels like Black Mirror," which I'm a big fan because, like, I grew up again back to my childhood. I grew up watching reruns of the Twilight Zone all the time. That's part of my DNA. Twilight Zone reruns, Star Trek reruns, and then all the new stuff that came out. But those two were my go-to reruns all the time. And yeah, man, I was like, this guy, like Rod Serling with Twilight and Gene Roddenberry, like, I don't know what I would be with if those two cats hadn't existed and made those shows, you know? Nice. So yeah, that's a great compliment to say that, like, because to me, Black Mirror is just the continuation of Twilight Zone, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
They just had to rebrand it because they don't have the rights, right?
Right. I'll mention very quickly, I do have thoughts on the first 2 seasons of Black Mirror versus the 3rd season when Americans got interested. And it's like the first 2 seasons, you had to figure it out. But like once Americans got interested, they like.
You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir. Yeah. I'm actually a big fan of more of the British The Office than the American The Office. I actually like the Ricky Gervais version even more. There's something about the British. Like, again, I also grew up watching reruns of Monty Python's Flying Circus. You know what I mean? So I love British humor as well.
Yeah. So what is your cultural makeup? That's not to say what's your ethnicity, but what is the culture of where you grew up and the uniqueness where you're from?
My cultural makeup, like, not scientifically DNA. Hey, well, I mean, just to put it, like, my mom grew up in Mississippi, deep in Mississippi, in a county called Bolivar County, which is just poor sharecropping county, you know, in Mississippi. My dad was actually from Guyana, South America, you know. Obviously, you trace it back long enough, it's all via slave trade. Obviously, we're all here via slave trade. It's just sometimes the slave trade makes different stops, you know. A lot of people forget that the South American continent had a lot of plantation work as well as the North, right? So yeah, my dad was Guyanese and my mom was Mississippian.
Yes.
So the first benefit of that cross-cultural whatever, you know, those 2 stops on the diaspora is that Southern, you know, culture was one half of the family, my mother's side, but the Caribbean was the other. So like you got the fried chicken hog maws on this side, but you got the curry goat and roti on this side, man. You know what I mean? So that side of my family, the father's side, identifies more with my Jamaican friends, my Trinidadian, my Bayesian, you know, all of that. And then this side is like, well, you from the South, you from the South.
Right.
You know, as a matter of fact, I still have extended family that migrated from, my mom was the only one who migrated from Mississippi to New York. But a lot of her siblings migrated to Detroit. So like you might even have run into some of my cousins and not even know it.
My mom's father is from Mississippi.
Oh, is that right? See, we're probably like, we're going to find out that we're actually cousins and we didn't know.
Right.
And I would not be surprised in the least, you know?
Right.
Well, we could get into like off camera, we can like do notes on genealogy.
Right.
But a funny thing, because if my mom had moved anywhere other than New York, I wonder if I would culturally be what I am today, because being in that city, for me, especially once I was old enough to leave, like, you know, my little neighborhood, you know what I mean? Yeah. My neighborhood was curated, you know, whatever you want to call it, working class neighborhood in Queens, you know what I mean? I can't think of a movie right now, but like, I don't know, I'll find a movie where it's like, imagine that scene and that's where I grew up, you know, like maybe Roll Bounce, I don't know, whatever. But once I got my sort of, you can roam the city pass, you know, let's call it 12, 13. I can go through all the 5 boroughs in New York and get on the subway and discover what New York actually is.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Then culturally, I became this weird hybrid of like, because at any given moment, you're in a Greek neighborhood, you're in an Italian neighborhood, you're in an Armenian neighborhood, you're in a Russian neighborhood, you're in a Jamaican neighborhood, and then that, remember we talked about like, oh, I had to learn how to pretend to be different people to fit in with different groups. Well, being able to travel around New York took that to like level 12, because guess what? Not only now do I get to like maybe put on sort of affectations of this clique, I get to learn languages now. I get to learn actual stories about where people come from by hanging out with the people from their national culture. So then at a certain point, I can go through a ton of friends and say hi in all these languages, because I learned if you speak a little bit of somebody's language to their people, especially if you're in their house with their family, you just learn this much of their language or the way they speak. All of a sudden, you are received in a way that you're not received if you don't even give a little effort. You know what I mean? So, obviously some things you can get gifted because the language was already spoken in your house or in your family, if you're lucky, one of those bilingual. But in New York, everybody speaks some Spanglish. So you may like, ¿cómo estás? Whatever, and like, ¿tienes cambio para $20 bill? You know what I mean? You could, if you don't speak some Spanish in New York, like what are you even doing, right? Same in LA, actually. You know what I mean? It's just that the Spanish in New York is either Dominican or Puerto Rican. The Spanish in LA is Mexican, but same. You know what I mean? Same idea.
I remember because moving to LA was like the second time I've been to LA, and so I visited my cousin a little bit before I moved to LA, and there was his friend did these like meetups where it was like just people talking about relationships, black people talking about relationships or any topic or whatever. And we had one of those networking bingo cards, and one of them was like, "Does anybody speak a second language?" And they're like, this group of people on the couch, like, "Yeah, we're from LA." Like,
like hello.
Well, at least one of you like initial this.
And again, not fluent. I don't even claim to be fluent. But I speak enough Spanish to like just get through.
But I feel like that's what they were on too. Like
I actually probably speak more French than I do Spanish. The first French I learned, actually, I had friends from Haiti who would speak a French Creole. You know what I mean? And then I met some other actual French New Yorkers, and then I fell in love with like being able to at least converse a little bit with them. And then was the first big lesson I learned is like, oh, the difference between these two is where you roll the R's. In Espanol you roll the R's on the front of your tongue like but in French you roll the back like R. Like frère Jacques, you know what I mean? And then when you go over into like the Arabic side of the fence, that rolling the back comes in handy because it becomes the h. You know what I mean? It goes from the softer French R to the h, like a lot of people, like lately Gaza is in the news, right? So the Americanized, the anglicized version is Gaza, but if you're saying it in Arabic, it's Gaza, It's that kind of very almost Arabic, like, half French.
Hero or whatever.
Like euro, like and that's more like a like a euro, right?
Oh, euro. Okay,
yes, and so that's the fun part. And then if you can walk into the room and just greet people, just like, hey, salut, or comment ça va, or Russian friend, you're like, Deborah A, как vai dела сегодня, and just a little bit, it goes a long way. And then all of a sudden you're in, you represent our people. Oh, thank you. You took the time to learn how to say this in our native tongue. At
least there was like a buffer being American, because when I lived in South Korea, like obviously,
안녕하세요.
But like, the first year I was an English teacher, and then the second year was like my first job in animation.
Nice.
As an English teacher, like I know that just because you say a couple words in English, you're not fluent. But then, like once I was taking like Korean classes, and I'm like, oh, let me like test these out, like my teacher commands, and then they start talking to me in fluent Korean, like, whoa, I just
so that is the danger. That's one of the things that I learned in French to do immediately is like, after I try to say a little bit, I learned a few phrases to help tamp that down. So one of the phrases I had to learn is like, I don't speak French so well. Je ne parle pas français si bien. Je viens de commencer. Tu peux, m'aider, can you help me, or whatever. So then you immediately let them know you're not fluent in the language that you're not fluent in. You know?
Right.
And so but one thing I've learned, aside from whether or not usually the conversation doesn't continue in their language, they come over to English and help you out. But as a social lubricant, so to speak, one of the things that as an American specifically, I realized, because I've observed some really bad American behavior when I go abroad with, Americans who take their empire privilege like for granted.
That from actual Korean Americans over there.
Oh, okay. So you understand, so a lot of people are accustomed to Americans behaving like imperial pricks. You know what I mean? Like, we run the world, we got the guns, so do what I say, speak English, damn it, that kind of thing. And once I realized that is what's expected, and I kind of got sad that is what the expectation. Yeah. And then I took it upon myself, like, every time you encounter me, then I'm going to make sure that is not what happens. I want to go maybe the extra mile to say, no, I respect you, your culture, I'm in your house. Or even if I'm not in that country, if there's a bunch of you gathered, I'm in your house. If there's 5 Koreans and I walk in, I'm in Korea. You know what I mean?
Like, sometimes when I've been in like either Koreatown or like just been anywhere where there's like, I could tell people are speaking Korean, I'm like, should I double Dutch into this like and say hi, or would that freak them out? Like, I'm like,
oh, you mean like total strangers or people you know?
Yeah, total strangers.
Oh, okay.
I'm just like, should I impress them with my knowledge of
that you can actually speak? Yeah, it depends on. I mean, that's where you have to now be good at reading behavior and to see, are they the kind of people? Is there a way you can slip in on a pretense? You know what I mean? Like, this is part of the craft of animation, is like what you end up doing is reading human behavior all the time. A good character animator is always studying the way people behave and trying to read the subtext and what is their body language telling you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So even in English, though, there are times where you can butt into a conversation and time you can't. You know what I mean? You just got to read the room, right?
Something I learned pretty early moving to LA, because I moved here a month before the pandemic hit, so I had like a good month of networking.
Oh, okay.
Some people in LA just butt into the conversation. I was like,
oh my gosh, yes.
Is this a norm? Did I have to like, or is this offensive? Like, should I be offended, or is this what people do?
In LA, I learned coming from New York to LA, that I've never been in a scenario where people are so ready to share their innermost secrets with a total stranger. Like, you could be online for coffee and somebody, while you're waiting, someone's like, hey, how you doing? Hey, did I tell you, like, can I just tell you about how I hate my mom? Like, or what? I'm like, what's going on here? Why everybody's a therapist to everybody at any given moment, in LA.
But my version was, I was at a networking event and I was patiently waiting for the person to get done talking to the person to talk to, and then the other person just was like, started talking. I'm like, wait, I was in line.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of weird. LA is, well, again.
Yeah, it's opportunistic. So it's my fault. I waited patiently with
it's kind of LA's calling card, because it technically didn't exist until the industry that made LA famous existed. And because of that industry, I mean, it's the reason I live in LA. I would not be living here if there were no film industry. You know what I mean? I'm a New Yorker. I'm always going to be a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker for life. I root for the Knicks, baby. Just so we're clear on that. But I am a filmmaker for life as well. So, but I think there is I got to come out here and make it aspect that permeates when you come here, and you're either going to be, I really got to make it in this business, which is not easy to make it in. My trajectory has not been, hey, just a steady ascent. I've had to do some scrapping and clawing and whatever, scraping. And so I think a lot of that, people are like, I'm going to get mine before, this is my chance. Don't get in the way of my chance. You know what I mean? Which,
have at it, because I figured out my version of how I'm getting it, because I still get jobs and I ain't got to be rude. So
yeah, and I don't think you have to be. As a matter of fact, most of the jobs, I mean, not most, well, in the latter part of my career, a lot of the work I've gotten has been from being the opposite. People recommend, hey, I've worked with this guy. I like working with this guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. I live by the don't be an asshole, mandate,
3 out of the 4 jobs I've had in the industry since I've moved to LA is for my network.
There you go. I love, you've seen the Ocean's 11, the first Clooney one, the Soderbergh one. There's a moment where the big bad, who I think is played by Andy Garcia, he's the casino boss, whatever. And he's like, he's threatening him. He's like, hey, watch your back, because I'm going to send some, you're not going to just I'm going to take you out. And so Clooney says, I know all the guys you're going to send after me. They like me better than you. To me, that is the ultimate superpower. That's what I learned in childhood, is like, I don't have to be the biggest, baddest guy who's going to put a beat down on somebody. I don't have to be bigger than the bully. I just have to make sure everybody likes me more than they like the bully. That's more power.
a unique thing. I'm sure it's not that unique, but because I hear about a lot of people who, depending on where you come from, like if you like, whether you make it known that you have a problem with somebody, or like if you're watching like Basketball Wives and she's my sister, she has a problem with you, you have a problem with me now, like
right. They inherit your beef.
My thing, I do not have to prove to you that I don't like you. There are people who do not know that I do not like you.
Right. Also, and what do you gain from publicizing it? If you're going to make enemies,
Sometimes those same people give me opportunities, and that's not the reason I do it, but it's just like.
But why not? Why not get the opportunity?
No, that's not the reason I don't treat them like. That's not the reason I don't prove to them that I don't like them.
Oh, sure.
It's not because of the opportunity. It just, I don't. Why?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you've ever worked a gig where like you have to answer to somebody, let's say, who might rub you the wrong way. Yeah. Well, part of just professionalism 101 is, well, that's your problem. Keep it inside. You were hired to do a job. Yeah. You are hired to be professional and pleasant on that job. I don't care if nobody else is pleasant. Yeah. I don't care if everybody rubs you the wrong way. I'm a pro. And one of the things I hang my hat on is ask around. Nobody I've ever worked with has said JP has come into work unpleasant. Right. That is absolutely off the table. That's never going to happen because I'm a professional.
And that's the big thing of what you said earlier is like people will choose somebody that they like working with over if there's a more talented person. And that's, I think, a big thing with our industry of, people who are like shyer or, have social anxiety or something like that. Something with my platform, because I have an authentic networking video that I have, and I plan to add like to that to help people kind of get out of their shell and stuff like that. But yes, we're in a art industry where your art, like particularly if you are an artist, your art is king, but you have to talk to people and build relationships with people, and you have to make yourself memorable before you leave that job. If nobody remembers you, unless you're like super duper artist and like you, like they got you from like Australia to come, like
unless you're in the top 0.1%.
You have to be remembered for who you are, not your art.
Well, because recommendations, they're. Well, what are the 3 R's? They're like, I'm riffing off of something another filmmaker said, but they're usually 3 reasons you do a gig, and they all begin with the letter R. The reel, the revenue, the relationships. So the reel is obviously, hey, this is going to look good on my reel, right? You do good body of work, it represents you going forward, and we should all be building our reels, right? The revenue, of course, we got to pay the bills. So obviously that's a good reason to take a job, right? And every job doesn't have all 3 of these. Sometimes you only take it for the one, but if you get all 3, that's like bingo, Right. And the relationships is the last R. And arguably that at the beginning of your career, especially, that could be the most important R, even more important than my reel and the money is, are people willing to say good things about you when you're not in the room? You know what I mean? Because man, oh man, if they're not, and worst case, if they say bad things about you when you're not in the room, it doesn't matter how talented you are now. You just, because we're human beings. We are still mammals. We enjoy the company of people that are pleasant, that make us feel good, because if you're going to be spending, I don't know how many hours, 40, 50, 60 hours a week on a gig, on a show, a movie, game, whatever, people really don't want to have to sit through an unpleasant experience day in and day out for hours and hours on end. And if if the talent level is like between you and another person, and the person's just this much maybe more experienced than you, but you're this much more pleasant, pleasant. I'm sure I have beat out for gigs animators who are more experienced than me because the guys liked me more. I'm sure I have. You know what I mean?
Something, I don't know if I've mentioned it on the channel before, but like I like TikTok University. I watch a lot of I identify as neurotypical, but I do watch a lot of neurodivergent content. And there was like one creator who was making a point of explaining like how neurodivergence works is like there's like a first floor and a second floor, and neurotypicals take the stairs, but like neurodivergents, like there's like a rocket or like a climbing a rope. There's like they're trying to figure out a different way. But,
like a Rube Goldberg device to get.
Yeah. But something because I was trying to explain to one of my friends like the importance of networking, and I was using that analogy that she used, but the importance of relationships is that the stairs is where you build the relationship. It's not that you're just going from the first floor to the second floor. You're in conversation and you're in relationship with the person.
Yes. These are things you can learn at those parties and mixers because one of the things I love to do sometimes when I think this has happened out of just necessity, but you've been in those things where 4 or 5 strangers are now gathered.
Yeah.
We've all met each other. We all want to talk and figure out who we are and what we're interested in. Everybody's trying to simultaneously learn about the group, but also let you know about me too, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I watch as these things evolve, and then I'll realize who are the like alpha talkers. They'll rise and become like, okay, I want to have more of the spotlight, right? Which I've been guilty of being that person too.
Yeah.
But then now I try to say, I'll feel myself rising, and then I look around for the people that are shrinking, right? Who probably want to say something, and then you could, like, they were about to open their mouth and somebody cut them off. And then you can read the face right after that. A little bit of, nobody asked me to. So then what I'll do is as that person's like, okay, you said what you got to say. I'm going to rise. I'm like, what were you going to say? And then point to the person, you know what I mean? And then you see them saying, oh, you saw me? You heard the thing I didn't say, but I wanted to say, all of a sudden I'm that person's best friend. You know what I mean? And now I'm keeping the group dynamic a group dynamic. Unbeknownst to them, I'm now ringleading the conversation to make sure everybody gets a say. You know what I mean? So we keep, like a host of a talk show or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
One funny thing during that 1 month of networking before the pandemic hit, because I identify as an introvert, in the definition, like the dictionary definition, in that human beings drain energy.
Yeah, you come out really drained.
Not that I'm incapable of talking. I think that's like extra. I think that's subcategories of introversion
Sure.
kind of apply. But I remember I went to I'm not dyslexic, but I never remember these IGDA, or is it IDGA?
Oh, I never remember them either.
I went to one of those meetups, and I had already been to a couple meetups, and I'm just like, I had asked the person who was signing us in, I'm like, who are the important people to talk to? Because I only have so much energy, and I just need to talk to those people. Who can give me a job? Right.
I totally understand.
I love talking to these students, but
I'm on a mission, like I have priorities. No, and on the flip side, I'm on the extrovert side of that spectrum. Yeah. So if anything, that's what I train myself to do, is like not just be the guy who ends up putting on a one-man show, the whole thing, because that doesn't get me a good relationship with all the people that I prevented from talking. You know what I mean? So I give myself a window when I come into the room. I can be the me that I trained myself to be. It's like, what's up, y'all? In the house? Like coming like 90s Chris Tucker, you know what I mean? And then but while I'm doing it, there's another part of me that's scanning, get everybody's face, remember names, start reaching out, and then look to see who might actually be that silent but powerful person who is not speaking. And then once you've identified, now shut up and start making individual connections, right? And let them talk, you know what I mean? But you need to let them know you're here, though. I got to come in and let you know I'm in the house. I'm in the building, y'all. Now that you know I'm here, I'm going to be like, so tell me more about what do you? And they're like, wow, the guy with the big mouth wants to hear about me. Good.
A quick, because when you're saying let people know you're here, like I used to be heavily involved in the Urban League movement when I was in New Orleans, and our president and CEO at the time, she just was like so busy, she had to go to like 4 events at a time, and her strategy was like, I have to talk to the big mouths. I have to talk to the 3 big mouths in the room so that people know I was here and that I'm gone.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good strategy, right? Because the echo can continue even after you're gone. Like, oh, he was here.
Like, oh yeah, she was just here.
I heard her. Like she must have gone,
Like, even if you didn't see me, I did show up.
Because everybody in the back of their mind says, well, I couldn't have been tracking everybody, so I'm sure she was around. You know what I mean? She just probably got into a deep conversation and they wandered off, right?
Right.
And the bigger the party, the easier it is to do that. You know what I mean? I've done that too. I've been going to a party for 10 minutes and then I'm out. But make noise for 10 minutes. What's up? What's up? Hey, how's it going? Hugs. Everybody's like, oh, you're up in everybody's face, and then ghost. And nobody knows you weren't there all night. You know?
Right. Because you made your impact.
Yes. But if you sneak in, they didn't even know you were there. You know what I mean?
So you gotta do the big bang. But then you do your Irish exit.
Yes. Start your movie with a big action fight chase scene. And then you can have like very soft drama after that. And then you can end the movie like in 10 minutes. So going back, that's childhood lessons, by the way. All of that was learned in my childhood. Yeah. So
what is your favorite custom or tradition from your childhood or from your family? Or from your culture or from your family?
Well, let's see. Well, let's just do the like, okay, everybody's got holidays and da. Although like Christmas, for example, wasn't like the normal Christmas, like in our, like my dad was a doctor. Okay. And so he had a little office in Harlem, and a lot of times he would free of charge, just like people come in like, I got a problem I can't afford. He was like, don't worry, just come on in. Let's just take care of it. He would do a lot of pro bono stuff out of his office. Right. And
have you seen the Nick?
Oh, the Nick, yeah, with Clive Owen and Andre Holland. Yeah. Oh, great. I mean, I'm a big fan of.
I still got to finish, but
yeah, I'm a fan of his as a filmmaker. Yeah, I'm a Soderbergh fanboy too. Yeah, so he's one of the guys I want to be when I grow up. Is Soderbergh, you know, in addition to everybody like Jordan Peele, David Fincher. There's a whole lot of guys I want to be. But my dad was one of the things that really taught me what my dad was Christmas, because we'd have a little Christmas tree, it was a little humble, whatever. We'd fun. Like, can I have an Atari? You know, that would be my biggest, like, if I could. And that was it. But man, oh man, all of a sudden the doorbell, there's a certain point on December 24th, the doorbell would start ringing. And people would come in. And people, you know that scene in The Matrix, it's one of the Matrix sequels where like people just show up at the door with all these gifts and food, and they lay it down at Neo, you know, in Trinity. People with the gratitude that I would see return to my dad around that time, people like, thank you, God bless you for doing this thing, because we didn't have the money, and you made sure we were, when my son was blah blah, when he had whatever sickness, and then another, and the gifts were not like, oh God, here's $1 million, just coming in and sharing all this genuine gratitude for what you did for us. You know, to me, that was the Christmas, like that's like, my dad was rich when it came to that, because it would just be doorbell after doorbell after doorbell of the, we are so thankful for you, you saved my kid and or my life. Once I came home, there was a trail of blood. I got off the bus and I saw a trail of blood on the sidewalk, and I'm like, this is weird. This is like one of those weird mystery shows about to happen. And that trail of blood was headed straight up the block towards my house. And I was like, okay, and it turned the corner exactly where I turned the corner, this trail of blood. And then it turned, and then my gate was open to and then it turned up up the stairs into my house, this trail of blood, and the door is open. Now, what do you do when a trail of blood is leading right to your house after school, and you call out and nobody answers? Do you go in, or?
I mean, not if you look like us.
Well, I'm an idiot. I went in the house.
Okay.
And it was empty. My mom wasn't there. Like, nobody's home. I found out later, after just like sweating, like what is about to happen. They come home, and one of my best friends, turns out they were trying to put up a fiberglass rim with a hammer, and something happened, and the whole thing shattered. And
science is important.
Yes, sliced my friend's lips in half.
Ooh.
The blood. The only thing, he was in a panic and he's bleeding out of his face. The only thing he could think of is to go to my house, where my folks live, right? Because I'm a son of a doctor and a nurse. So it was like, you got something, go to that house.
Yeah.
And that's why the trail of blood went right up into my house. So it made more sense. The moment he knocked on the door, they grabbed him and boom, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
and stitches and yada, yada, yada. But so that's the kind of, so that's the long way of saying Christmas wasn't about like getting a whole lot of gifts, but it was about getting a whole lot of payback for all the good that my folks did for other people in the community. you know.
And that's making me think. So like, I feel like we're in a time, particularly as the Black community, where because we're Americans and we live under like white supremacy and it's very individualistic culture, our culture is becoming very individualistic because, you know, in the 60s, I mean, there was multiple ways to be Black, but there was not multiple ways to be Black. But in 2024, there's like multiple ways to be Black, and everybody wants to be an individual because we've been seen as a monolith for so long. But when you're talking about people coming to the door, the idea of being thankful, what I've noticed recently is like people don't be saying thank you no more. Like we teach all our kids to be like please and thank you, but I'm like, y'all know when we become adults, you still supposed to say please and thank you. Like
you even more so when you're an adult. I make it a point to say please and thank you to let people know that. You know, like it's like, you know, servers, for example, like treating servers like they're your slaves. I never understood that. For like, first of all,
how they handle your food.
How could you do that to anybody who handles your food, right? Like, how could you not treat them like they're your best friend in the world? First of all, I just believe, again, I'm a socialist. I believe that we're all family and we should all be acting as such, you know. And I believe to a certain degree, as did a lot of, you know, not just to mention Fred Hampton and Huey Newton, but also Richard Pryor and James Baldwin, that capitalism is the antithesis. That system sets up this hyper individualistic, like, oh, we only have a few scraps and we got to fight each other to get those few scraps, rather than we need to recognize we are our brothers and sisters keepers, all of us, right? You know, Malcolm talked about the slave mentalities. Which kind of slave are you? You know what I mean? I'm going to identify as a field slave every time. I don't want to be in the house. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the slave that looks down on the other slaves from the master's point of view.
So my goal, I just told somebody this, I don't want to be the person that Harriet would have shot.
Right.
I want to be like,
yes.
I'm Harriet's number 2.
Yes, I want to be Django, not Stephen. You know what I'm saying? You know, Stephen might have had a more comfortable life, but I would rather have, you know, I'd rather identify with my fellow laborers. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, there was a great forgotten interview that Richard Pryor did, and you know Richard Pryor, right? So,
have you heard him sing?
Richard Pryor sing?
He sings apparently.
I don't think I ever got any of him singing. Now I gotta go look for that.
There's like a YouTube video where he's singing.
That's great. Well, this is also on YouTube. You can find, like, there used to be a show called Bill Boggs was a guy who had his own talk show, right? You know, it was like a lesser known talk show. He had Richard Pryor on once, right after his show got canceled. Now, Richard had a show. He had like a Dave Chappelle, Key and Peele kind of thing before Dave Chappelle and Key and Peele, but they killed it very quickly. And he's asking him, why did they cancel your show? And he said, it's because I think it was going to get too many, it was going to start too many problems. And they're like, what kind of problems are you talking about? He said, it was going to get Black people and white people talking to each other. And he said, Bill Boggs says, why would you think that would be a problem, Richard? He says, because once Black people and white people start talking to each other, you're going to see what the problem is.
And it's not.
And he's like, what's the problem? He says, rich people. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, because when you realize racism, the way it continues in our society is because of capitalism. That's why they don't want my show on, you know? And I was like, oh my gosh, Richard is spitting some, these like, so clearly those are the kind of things that,
I mean,
like,
and then you can go to Arsenio Hall.
Yes.
You can go to what Martin Luther King was talking about right before he.
I mean, everybody forgets the socialist Dr. King. They always remember the "I have a dream" that I want, you know, boys and girls to hold hands and the flowery stuff. You know, they never talk about the fact that he said the evils of militarism, racism, and capitalism are all intertwined, and that capitalism is an unjust system that takes necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes. You know, he was Dr. King, so he still had to rhyme and whatnot. You know what I mean?
The Santa Clausification of Martin Luther King.
I mean, that's every
I have
January.
a post on Facebook that I copy and paste, like, because, you know, a lot of people share the same quotes from Martin Luther King, and so I took all the quotes that y'all don't share.
That you don't share. Yes.
Where he's talking about the white moderate.
Yes, he's like, oh, I wish I could do a good Martin Luther King voice, but I have to admit I am disappointed in the white moderate. You know, who what does he say? That he prefers a negative piece to a positive piece. A negative piece, which is the absence of tension. to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, right?
Right.
Real
Yeah.
peace is different from
Mhm.
quiet. And he understood that. And that's when he started getting dangerous, as you know, when he started speaking up against the war machine, against capitalism, when he's starting to say, let's organize poor people to march. Let's strike with sanitation workers. You know, now he's talking about economic justice, not
Yes.
just can we integrate a swimming pool.
And now
You
you've
know
gone
what I mean?
too far.
Now you're messing with people's money. You know, this is what, like, remember that talk he gave? There's the real quick clip. He says, now we're going to come get our check. You know, that one.
Yeah.
That's the dangerous MLK. That's the one they didn't like. You know, the let's hold hands and hug each other and let's, the Nichelle Nichols stay on Star Trek version.
Right.
That we're okay with that. You know?
Which a lot of people don't realize is like they had to convince Martin Luther King to do nonviolence. Like they had to, because he had an arsenal of guns in his house, and they're like, you can't teach nonviolence and have these guns.
He was more Fred Hampton than you think. You know what I mean?
Right? Once you stop letting those people tell you who Martin Luther King is and start reading from our people.
But of course, if you rely on mainstream media to learn about anything, you'll be waiting a long time. You know what I mean? Just as Brother Malcolm said, if you you know, like I think Malcolm X spoke at Oxford once, and he was talking about he used Hamlet as an analogy, that passage of Hamlet.
Brought that up.
Really? Oh, get out of here! And he's like, basically, to be or not to be, or whether it's nobler to, you know, basically he was making. Can you just? Are you going to sit there passively and let life throw this at you, or are you going to take up arms and try to end it? And he says, yeah, well, if you wait for the man who's in charge to do something about it, you're going to be waiting a long time, you know? And that's when he was making a call to young people to do something about the injustice around you. Don't just sit there and take it, you know what I mean? Yeah. But my favorite, Malcolm, is when he was in Selma, when Dr. King was in Selma. I don't know if they put a little bit of that in the movie Selma, right? Where he confronts Coretta in the basement. And she said, why are you here, Brother Malcolm? I don't want you to cause no trouble. Right. But that's based on an actual, when Malcolm showed up in Selma, there were a couple of reporters. I don't know if you ever saw that clip where they're like, well, why? Because you and Dr. King disagree on quite a few things. Why are you here? And Malcolm just plainly said, well, Dr. King's right. What he's asking for is right. And he's asking nicely. So y'all should give it to him, because one of these days somebody's going to ask not so nicely. And he just drops the mic and he's out.
And Selma, watching Selma, it was a light bulb moment for me where if you pay attention to the movie of not everybody has to be Martin Luther King. Somebody has to make him laugh. The woman who made them a meal. Not everybody has to be up on the pedestal. There are people around who are helping as well. What is your piece?
Not everybody's a point guard. You know what I mean? Somebody's got to grab rebounds. Somebody's got to crash the boards, right? Like,
but we're still a team. That's what
we are still a team. That's what we are, a species, and collective action, collaboration, empathy. Look at all the species that are super successful. Bees, ants. One of the things they do better than anybody, right, is work collectively, right?
Teamwork makes the dream work.
and honestly, and you know, and that's one of the reasons why in a capitalist society, the words like socialism and communism got a bad rap. They got vilified. But look at the literal etymology of those words: social, community. That's where socialism and communism come from. They are about collective, taking care of the whole. Nobody falls underneath. Yeah. What did MLK say? A rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah. Yeah, rising the tide for everyone, not just a few living in ivory towers, you know. Yeah. And that's why I even in the industry aspect of this thing, you know, I want an industry. I mean, it might be a pie in the sky dream that we have a scenario where storytellers of all stripes, colors, whatever, can find ways to tell their stories. It doesn't have to. Does everything have to be a $300+ million budget blockbuster to be told? No, I don't think so at all. Right. And I think we should be empowering every kind of voice to find. And as a collective, there are enough of us roaming the countryside with our talents. We could be making movies in these smaller collective units. We don't necessarily have to go through this one machine, you know. One of the things that makes movies expensive is that you do have to pay the people working on the movie, right? But what if a bunch of people decided, because of this particular movie is important to us, we wanted to work on it, not necessarily for our top rate, but because we believe in it. You know, we just want to do it. Right. And we get it out there. We can distribute it. You know what I mean? I think the future is going to have a lot more of that going on. You know, like even in animation, those pioneers that started it back in the 70s and 80s, the system wasn't there to truly take advantage of it. You know, I'm diverting a little bit into that, but you know, like guys like Don Bluth, Ralph Bakshi, you know, when they said, we're not doing what Disney does, we're going to do something different. You know, Ralph Bakshi says, I'm doing stuff for grown-ups, for adults. I'm doing Fritz the Cat. I'm doing American Pop and all that. But Don Bluth says, well, I am going to do what Disney does just on my own. I'm going to do Secret of Nim. I'm going to do Land Before Time, you know. Both of them, I think, had really great ideas in terms of how they were going about it. If you could alter the timeline, what they both needed was an internet. You know what I mean? In the 70s and 80s, you still had to go through a proper distributor to a movie theater, or else nobody's going to see it. Don't have that problem today. You know, there should be a million more Ralph Bakshis and Don Bluths today, in my opinion.
For me, studying Kev on Stage, I think an additional piece to the key of independent animation and filmmaking is community.
Agreed.
Because being part, because I followed Kev on Stage since the Playmakers, where he was making church content, and so to see him get his own studio and all this stuff, like he has built a community that begs him to make stuff so they could pay for it.
So, you're talking about the audience now. You're talking about target audience community. Yes.
But it's still it's like he has a Patreon where if there's a community. So where he built the community, he started posting every day individually. But the big thing that he did, which I wish I had taken more advantage of his Periscope time, but he would go when Periscope was popular. He was working at All Def Digital. He had a long commute. He would go live every day and talk to the people.
Yes.
But so that is obviously he's a comedian. He creates content and all this stuff, but that community aspect,
absolutely,
of inviting his audience into his life.
And as a performer, that's an advantage. Like you should take advantage of that. That like reaching out, you know, the extrovert. That's the superpower of. And
that's the thing about people. Some people in animation, it's like I've gone to some people's websites and I'm like, you don't even have an about me section.
Trust me, I do a lot. I
don't know what you look like because you have a drawing.
It's tough. It's tough if you don't. The world is skewed in favor of extroverts, hands down. It's not even. It's not even close, right? It's not fair either. I'm not even saying it's fair. It's totally unfair. However, acknowledging that it is unfair, we have to find if you weren't born, like basketball analogy again, you know, yes, the sport is skewed towards height, right?
Yeah.
If you, even with minimal skills, if you are 6'8", you could be a good role player. You know, be willing to rebound, and you're 6'8", and box out. You know what I mean? Exactly. I'm a New York Knicks, so obviously I'm going to sing the praises of Jalen Brunson. He's a smaller guard he's not the typical point guard phenomenon type, right? He's not a Curry. He's not an Iverson, right? Doesn't explode. He's not John Morant, right? However, the things he does, he's maximizing what he does in his lane. You know what I mean? Footwork. Uses the body. He can post up. Jalen scores a lot in the post, right? So even if you're little, you can use what you do have to the best, and then surround yourself with people who are on your side. And that's what New York has done. They surrounded him with all his Villanova teammates. So he's small, but that's okay. Mikal Bridges got my back. Josh Hart got my back. Dante DiVincenzo got my back. I'm not alone. And if you make it to the rim, I got Mitch Robinson there. You know what I mean? So how do you put a team together? You know, I mean, you could argue that basketball is a great way of looking at the microcosm of I'm trying to do this endeavor that requires more than just me. Analyze your weak points, your weak spots, your vulnerabilities, form a team that covers up all your weak spots. I'm not the best defender. Okay, let me make sure OG Anunoby is right there. You know
I feel like the benefit of 2024 is with people who are like shy or, you know, to themselves introverts, there's actually the benefit of the avatar where other people accept that. So you can build your audience of people who are like you, who we're just all avatars talking to each other. We don't know what each other look like, but this is acceptable. And you're still building an audience.
And also, if you're trying to do actual narrative entertainment, like I think everybody should have some screenwriter in them. I don't think you should just I taught myself screenwriting. I'm self-taught, every script, everything. I'm pitching shows as we speak. I just YouTube University, whatever, and reading as many books as I could get my hands on. Obviously, everybody has read McKee's story at least once, or Truby, Sid Field. But you can run down a list of all the famous screenwriting books that everybody has to read if you go to screenwriting. If you go to school, you don't have to go to school to read those books. Read them, learn that storytelling is a craft just like any other craft. And just because you do this, I could do this visual thing, whether your weapon of choice is, Maya, Houdini, Blender, Unreal, Nuke, Unity, Motion Builder, Substance Painter, Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, Premiere, DaVinci, whatever. But also get some storytelling under your belt too, because hey, in a pinch, you might have to do some storytelling, right? And if all of us just have raise our storytelling game a little bit more, we could be more valuable to each other as hey, let's come up with a little thing and just produce it really quick, and then we can team up. Hey, I don't know Unreal that well, but I could. Oh yeah, you can come on. Let's just team up. If we were doing more of that, oh my gosh, there would be a Cambrian explosion even in our community. You know what I mean? Of IP.
Because there's this in traditional because I'm a 3D modeler, so in traditional spaces or even if you take tech too, you go hole up into a room and for a year you're I'm going to code, or I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to learn this thing.
Sure.
But for me, I have mentors where, hey, how do I do this? Oh, in 3 seconds, and I could have saved myself 3 months or 3 hours of looking on YouTube, and I don't even know what I'm looking for.
Right. Well, I mean, each one teach one. That's absolutely. If you don't have people you can learn from, oh my gosh, that's part of the game, by the way.
Yeah.
Is being able to ask, hey, how does this work? I mean, when I first crossed over from being a pencil animator to Maya, I got lucky again because I joined the team over at Sony on Spider-Man 1, and but I was surrounded by guys who oh, we get it. First time on a computer, huh? Yeah, this is different than flipping paper, my brother. But but they're really, really cool and willing to share and being selfless with I understand where you're at. All you have to do is, you see, the way the graph editor works is that, and all of a sudden you're oh, it makes sense now. See, now that a human being walked me through it, you know what I mean? And I have a lot of people. I'm so grateful to a lot of people at that stage of my journey who were just patient enough to say, "Oh, well, let me pull you aside and show you some stuff that it's going to be a lot easier from another human." Yeah,
because my natural thing is looking stuff up. But I've seen some self-taught people where I had a coworker where he was doing some type of modeling thing, and I'm looking. I didn't say, but I was why are you doing it like that? That's hard. There's a tool for that. Imagine if you have a box with an opening, there's one face missing, and you could just use the bridge tool or the whatever tool that is called, and whatever. I'm in Blender, edge loops tool. But some people will be let me extrude it, and then let me place it, and then let me merge why? There's a bridge tool. You could save 2-3 steps if you just use one tool. You don't have to extrude and then put it down. And then
so in other words, is your personality the type that would tap him on and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Is there a reason you're not using the bridge tool?"
At that point in our relationship, I just was quiet.
Because maybe he doesn't want your help. In other words, kind of.
I'm just it's not necessary for me. I also identify. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I'm also evolved a Virgo. So I learned to shut up.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
Sometimes it's just not
know it all.
Right, because depending on your personality type, it can come off as know-it-all.
Exactly.
Or it can come off and I think a lot of times if I am trying to give a piece of advice, I really try to be aware of, is this going to sound like I'm full of myself and I need to prove to you that I am smart, right? Yeah. Because if it comes off that way, it's not going to be received, right?
Right.
So one of the first things I can do is I could do an exploratory question hey, what you doing? Is that are you trying to do the thing? Blah, blah? Oh, that's cool. Oh, I didn't realize you could do it that way, because normally the way I do it is blah 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 blah, but you're doing it a different way. So, and then at that point they can say, wait, what did you say? How did you do it? Oh, see, because there's this bridge thing I do. So I like when I do it, like you go up to that menu to do it. So that's the way I do it. I don't know if that works better for you, but that's for me. It works awesome. Just so you know, in case you want that in your bag too.
Right.
You see what I'm doing? I'm trying to keep it all about you and how you want to do it. I just am sharing. Oh, I happen to do it a different way. I didn't say you need to do it this way. You know what I mean? When you start coming down with the do it this way, that you're doing it wrong, this is right, then a lot of people can be like, listen, I don't need to be lectured to, you know.
Because it's coming from my K through 12 where I didn't talk much, and then in college I was like, let me learn how to string 2 sentences together. So like but you know, I still talked a little bit, but people would call me a know-it-all. But when you're not trying to be one and nobody tells you how you're doing it, then you don't know how to fix it. But then I dated an ex where we had similar sensibilities, and I'm like, oh, that's okay, I can stop doing that now.
Because when you see when somebody does it to you,
I'm like, oh, I get it, I got it, did it, got it, good. Okay, but my theory is like, you grow up and sometimes your family lets you be yourself to some detriment. But then strangers aren't going to tell you about yourself. So unless you have like close friends, nobody's going to tell you what is off-putting about you. And so
what was acceptable in your house. Yeah.
Right. Even if you want to grow, it's like, I don't, the unknown unknowns. I don't know this is off-putting.
Absolutely. I had to struggle with that too a lot. Well, because like, you know, what's the operant conditioning, you know, where you do something, you get rewarded for it. If you get rewarded for a certain behavior, you want to do that behavior again because you want to get that dopamine hit again, right? So in your family, there might have been certain behaviors that in your house you got rewarded for, or like, oh, that's great. Like, you know what I mean? So you get conditioned to like, if I do this, this is acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Then you go into this other ecosystem that is not your house.
Right.
Well, it might turn out that behavior doesn't get you rewards anymore. As a matter of fact, it might be the opposite, you know? So like, I remember like similar to you, like, oh, I'm smart. I can get the right answer to every question. Right. Well, before I got into like mainstream school and it was just my house proving that I'm smart to my parents.
Right.
Every time it's like I get a dopamine hit. Good boy. Here, you know, like, no, you're so smart, right? And I'm wanting to prove it again and again and again. Yeah. But when you go to a whole, like a class full of people and you're trying aggressively to answer every question right before anybody else gets a chance to answer it, then it can come off like, oh, I'm trying to be superior to all of you. And then you realize there's more at stake in this classroom than the reward for getting every answer right. You know, I still want the teacher to know I'm smart.
Yeah.
I also don't want them to think I'm an asshole. You know, you know? How do I bridge that gap now? Now the game has become more complex, and the same dopamine hit doesn't work anymore. I need more. I need their acceptance too. How do I do this?
And then there's the flip side of my mom. Like, she would be in French class, and she like didn't study or something, or just didn't know the harder questions. So the teacher always had the easy, medium, hard questions. So she'd be like, easy questions. And then you go get caught on for the hard questions, and you're like, all right.
Wait, did the teacher announce? Did the teacher announce the easy questions?
That's just how the teacher always did it.
Oh, she started and goes off.
And so if I front load it
at the very beginning,
that's my class participation.
Kind of like Jeopardy. Let me answer all the $100 questions, and then I'm done.
Oh man, when I'm watching Jeopardy, I'm like, it's like Jeopardy, bowling, and laser tag. Like, my goal is to get, like, bowling, I'm gonna get 100. I'm gonna break 100. Jeopardy, I'm gonna get 4 questions right. Like, laser tag.
Yes.
My gun is always broken in laser tag. Apparently, I don't know how to use anybody's laser tag gun. I'm like, I'm gonna try to get 2.
That's funny. Well, you know, it's funny. You talked about like answering the easy questions versus the hard ones. The culture in my house growing up, whether this was fair or not, a lot of pressure was put on me to be smarter than everybody else in the class. You know, because I was, you know, the culture of like our ancestors didn't get a chance. Was
it whole or the Caribbean side?
It was both. Like, because both of my parents were kind of like overachievers in their families. My mom and her family from Mississippi, and my dad and his family from Guyana, they both, like, for her road to becoming an RN and then a teacher of nursing, and then for my dad becoming a doctor, it had been unprecedented in both families, right?
Yes.
They were the ones that their families bragged about as like they did it. They went to college, they did and they were the top of their class. My mom was valedictorian. So I am now the child of both of these overachievers. I'm the only boy. I have 2 older sisters. And so whether it's right or not, I get this sort of like the moment I exhibited a certain amount of, hey, he looks like he's pretty bright as a kid, immediately I get put in this box of he's a genius. He needs to overachieve. He needs to, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
We will not accept mediocrity from you. You know what I mean? When you go to class, and now we get this talk.
Yes.
Like, especially because remember, I'm taking a bus from a Black neighborhood to a white neighborhood. Mm-hmm. They're like, when you go in that class, your brain is equal to every brain in that classroom, and you are going to show them your brain. You're going to show them that you got everything they got and more, and 10 times more. You know what I mean? And so I was primed, like I'm going into the playoffs of intellectual.
Yes, I was like, I was thinking sports. I'm like,
yes, it is like first round of the playoffs, right? I'm going in like I'm getting this question right. And it's no longer, at least at the beginning, it wasn't. This is what I'm talking about, like bringing the culture from home into the school, and then I got to learn something better than that. There was nothing wrong with what my parents were telling me, and I still want to overachieve if I can. You know what I mean? But the way they set it up, I'm bringing all their baggage from the 40s, 50s, and 60s into this. Like, this is between me and the culture that has kept my people down, and I'm going to be smarter than all y'all white people. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing. So I thought of it as a game I had to win. So when my hand goes up, I'm proving something to all of you. You know what I mean? Right. But then after a while, I started realizing, well, my classmates just want to also be my friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this classmate who's somebody of a different color is not actively right this moment trying to put me down. They are just trying to go to school too and come home to their parents and explain to their parents, did they get good grades or whatever? You know what I mean? They have pressures too. They have things, and some of them like to read comic books too. And maybe it's not necessarily I got to bring all of my parents' struggle to that student and that student and that student. Maybe a couple of these teachers, though, need to learn something. Yes. But the kids aren't fully conditioned to where the teachers are yet. So I can make friends. Maybe there's another playoffs happening here. Maybe winning the hearts and minds of my classmates is also part of the game,
right?
And getting them to actually love me as a human being. You know what I mean? Not just that I'm better than you and I answer questions that you couldn't, and haha, I showed you I'm smart. But maybe also like, hey, I'm a person, you're a person. Let's talk. Let's play. And maybe the future that all of the people that we revere now, from MLK to Martin to whoever, maybe there was a future where all of the baggage can get dropped off at the door, and we can literally do that hand-holding utopia that we love to talk about every January 15th or whatever, right?
It's an ad.
Right? Maybe we can get there. So maybe those kids aren't my enemy to the degree that I was making them when I first started going to that school. Maybe there's a system beyond those kids.
Yeah.
And I had to understand that system, yes, I got to be ready to do intellectual battle in lots of different arenas. So don't hide my intellect. Don't what's the term? Don't hunch over because you're afraid of being tall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can learn simultaneously how to stand
I had to learn that as a 5'9" woman.
Oh, so you understand what it's like to be tall.
Stand up straight in pictures.
Yes, and as a 6'4" man, I had to learn the same thing. Although I didn't get tall till much later in high school, but at least metaphorically. But that doesn't mean I have to kick those other kids around either.
Yeah.
You can do both. You can stand tall and then empathize and show love, genuine whatever, to all your fellow human beings. Now, if you come at me, okay, that's different. Then I will channel all my ancestors.
Yes. I definitely would have liked to be in the room when I was a freshman in high school and I took history. I don't know if it was a specific time of history with like Mr. Stowe. And I had the highest grade out of all of his classes. And he was like one of those teachers that people talked about in the school because it was like 1,000,000 points. It's just 10 points just with extra zeros. Like, you get 1,000,000 points for this. And then the way he did his grades is like this top percent got A's, this percent got B's, and this percent got C's.
Okay,
So I
cool.
had the highest grade out of all of the classes, but he's like, oh, I don't give freshmen A's. But once my daddy went up there, I got my A. So I don't know what he said.
Something
and my dad don't remember what he said. And my dad is like a college professor, PhD.
Oh, nice. Wonderful. So I completely understand.
But also my father's like, I appreciate my head smarts over my book smarts.
Yes. Well, so I mean, again, there are systemic things that are happening at a higher level. And then there's the I'm 10 years old level things that are happening between me and my classmates or me and the teacher. And so, of course, I think I probably have very similar things where a parent had to go intervene on some levels that you were even unaware of. You know what I mean? But
you remember the Serena was it Serena Williams, their father?
Yes. Richard, is it Richard?
Richard, yeah.
Yes, Richard Williams.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember there were a couple times.
Asking her that question.
Yes. And which is, again, this is community, right? Watch my back, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think hopefully by now I've managed a nice blend of when I know I'm fighting the system and when I know that this is time to win hearts and minds and make friends. You know what I mean? You can do both. You know, because if you're militant 24/7, like round the clock, you're going to burn out.
You can get more bees with honey than with vinegar.
Absolutely. And isn't that the goal, that we are a society that's got more honey in it, ultimately? You know, but I think it's also very important to understand that when unjust systems are in place, those systems must be treated with the same, you must treat them like an opponent. There's no playing around with unjust systems, which is, I don't mince words when I talk about capitalism. I don't mince words when I talk about empire and militarism and colonialism. I don't mince words when it comes to it, because that's the harmful stuff, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
And a couple times in the conversation, I've thought about, you know, when I talk about, it's kind of funny. You'll appreciate this, but like when I talk about going to the next level of humanity, and people are talking about like robot arms and like AI or like, I'm talking about empathy. Like I'm talking about like going to the next level of interaction with humans, where you're trying to actually understand other human beings.
Absolutely.
And like I want us to get to a point where when aliens fly by, they don't lock their doors.
like in Contact. Yes. I don't know if you've seen the movie Contact. Have you seen Contact?
No.
The film? Put that on your movie watching list as well. Contact.
I got so many movies to watch.
Yes, Jodie Foster. I mean, literally, what part of what you're saying about aliens flying by and like saying, "Yo, y'all aren't ready." That's an aspect of Contact. I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But by the way, Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek. Again, I have to give him credit for I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, the Picard versions. There's one great episode where there are people from the 20th century that are frozen for whatever reason. They wake up in the 24th, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we're traveling the stars and da da da.
Right.
There was one of those guys. He was like a billionaire. And he realizes now all his money is gone. Like there's no money anymore.
Yeah.
Picard's trying to explain to this poor guy. Excuse me. Jean-Luc Picard is trying to explain to this unfrozen millionaire from the 20th century why money doesn't matter anymore. He's like, this whole conversation they have, and he's like, but how do you pursue greatness if there is no money? And Picard's trying to explain him, like, just by improving yourself. We have the arts, we have music, we can travel the stars, we can. What more do you want, man? But the guy couldn't get out of his own funk because he needed money. Even though money's imaginary, it's made up.
Right.
Money's a collective thing we make up to be able to exchange goods and services and interact with each other. But what if all that's already taken care of? What if goods and services are at your disposal? There's no scarcity to fight over things anymore. So you don't need the paycheck to keep a roof over your head, food on your table, clothes on your back. Everybody just has food on their table, clothes on their back, roof over their head. That's just part of being a human. Well, that could be done today if we wanted it to be. It doesn't need to be Star Trek. We have just chosen to support a system where we still got to do musical chairs. The term cost of living shows you where we are. Right. Living has a cost. Nobody asked to be born. Nobody asked to be alive. Well, and if you grow up, again, learning. The easiest way to keep any indoctrination going is to make sure a mother teaches the child that this is the way things are accepted, right? And don't buck the system. You know what I mean?
Except when millennials and Gen Z come and we're like, why?
And this is why I was back to, like, we were talking about animation mavericks back in the day versus now. And internet is the great equalizer in the ability to communicate with people outside your immediate bubble that you grew up in. I grew up pre-internet, so the only voices I had access to are in my house or in my neighborhood or later on in the school I attended. Other than that, I had to read a book.
Right.
Or maybe hear something on the radio if somebody were being interviewed on a show, or whatever the nightly news was going to show you, which ain't that much. The nightly news wasn't putting the Black Panthers on, you know what I mean? And if it was painting them in a very negative light. Right. It wasn't making Fred Hampton look good, or Malcolm X for that matter. You know that, right? Yeah. I grew up like hearing all this propaganda, like, oh, Malcolm X is a scary figure. You know what I mean?
And even when Martin Luther King was alive, his rating was not that high.
No, he was a hated man.
They changed it after he died.
Yes, just like the Red Scare anti-communist rhetoric, they applied all that to Martin Luther King. He was a scary commie too, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody who wanted poor people to be uplifted was always going to be branded as an enemy. An enemy of what? Well, an enemy of the super rich, of course. Because in the game of musical chairs, when you're fighting over 3 chairs in this room, there's somebody with 300 chairs in the next room. You just don't know. Right. That guy never wants you to bring the camera into that room so you can see all his chairs, because they know if you saw it, all these people would not be fighting each other. They'd be getting those chairs in the other room, like the island of Haiti, right? Mm-hmm. Once they realized, we're on an island. There are how many slaves versus how many masters? And y'all have nowhere to run.
Right.
Like, this is a place we should revolt. And then that's exactly what they did.
And then the French have been punishing them ever since. I want to ask, since you have that, so the kind of parents you have, were they supportive of your artistic journey?
They got there. At first, I'm not gonna why lie about this. There's no reason to lie anymore. Both my parents have passed away, but so they can't get mad at me regardless. Okay, first off, yes, when it came to just as a part of my, I guess they would have called it a hobby at that point, like when I'm a kid, right? Oh, look, he loves to draw. I'm always like nothing but crayons and markers all over the place, and then later comic books, and you know what I mean. And that's fine, because why not, right? But their real pride was that I ended up being a very good student. I was very quick. I learned a lot of things. So like even in the summer, they would take time and then tutor me, so I'd be ready for the next year. I'd be ahead of the class. You know what I mean? Okay, fine. This is my goal. This is okay. I get it. I got to overachieve for my people. Fine. But my real, like how I dealt with the world was always through drawing and painting. Right. 8th grade is where it went down, where it got real. Shit just got real because I had to make a choice to go to high school, and in the 8th grade. And there were specialty vocational high schools that were on the menu that you could, in New York, there was a whole system whereby you start trying to figure out what your high school choice is going to be. Right. And I'm going down. And of course, in their mind, there were schools they just knew were going to be on my list. There's a school called the Bronx High School of Science. There's a school
That's
called,
where my freshman year roommate went.
Oh, that's great. So I
was actually going to say it before you said
it. So Bronx Science was like, oh yeah, if you get good grades, you got to try out for Bronx Science. Stuyvesant was another one. Brooklyn Tech was another one. All these.
I went to school with all these people. So college.
They were the schools that if you were smart, of course you want to go here, right? Except farther down, there was this other school called the High School of Art and Design, and I was like, what? There was a feeling in my body when I got to that line that I cannot describe to you. I've never felt it since then. It was a feeling of knowing in the multiverse, this is a Nexus event. That if I don't choose the path of art now as a career, I'm not going to be me. The closest thing I can imagine I've heard anybody else talking about is like coming out if you're LGBT, that was my, I think it's time to come out moment. You know what I mean? And I went home and I said, I'm not trying out for Bronx Science. I'm not trying out for Brooklyn Tech. I'm not trying out for Stuyvesant. Well, what are you trying out for? And I held it up. This school, Art and Design. And they were like, art? I mean, we know you enjoy it, but I mean, come on. You know what I mean? So luckily my older sisters, who were also brilliant, like they were all straight A students, even more so than me. I think behind the scenes, a lot of talking was going on about and so they went and they scrutinized this high school to make sure that at least that they had some academic standards, so that like I would be getting an education. Like he's just going to go to a high school and paint all day. Like that's not an education. Like because they come from a world, remember, and I don't blame them. Whereas a Black person in America, your respect level was immediately tied to the diplomas on that wall and the degrees, you know what I mean? And they had all gone to secondary college, yada, yada, yada. And that one of the ways they defended themselves in this world is I have these letters behind my name, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's a force field of some sort, you know what I mean? They wanted me to have the same defense, right? Like you go get your master's, your PhD or whatever, and in something respectable so that nobody can ever mess with you in this world. They wanted their son to be okay. You know?
And I'm not sure how much this was acknowledged in real time because I was still a baby. But in the 80s and 90s, the tracking of like diverting Black kids into the trades, which actually it became a stigma in the Black community to go to trades or whatever.
Sure. And or blue collar as opposed to the traditionally white collar.
And I don't know how pervading that was in real time. I know looking back, I can say that was happening.
Sure. Oh, I think it was in New York. It wasn't just Black kids. It was like it was a weird thing in New York because all these high schools, New York probably has the highest number of specifically vocational centric high schools. Probably there's a high school for everything under the sun. There's a high school for just what was the one that was just for clerical, like office work. Like if you just wanted to be a secretary administrative assistant, there's a high school that will just prepare you in all of your electives, right? You'll come out of there, walk right into a job. And the idea is that you don't need college if you go to one of these high schools. You can walk out with the diploma and at least get an entry-level position in that field right out of high school. So that's the way art and design advertised. That like at least in the world of illustration, graphic design, photography, this is again back before digital.
Yes.
You could go into one of those magazine publisher and say, hey, I can do entry-level color separation work straight out of high school because I already learned that in my 11th and 12th grade classes, you know what I mean?
Right.
So now I'm saving my college tuition and just getting into the industry before, that. So I think that was the actual idea of a lot of these vocational. There's one to this day, transit tech, I think is there. So you can work in the subway. Like you know how to operate a train right out of high school. You know what I mean? So the problem, of course, because if you grew up in 1930s, 40s, 50s, without the educational protection, you're gonna feel vulnerable, right? So they didn't want me to be vulnerable, and I got that and I understood that, but I also I just knew something inside me knew. I fast forwarded and I saw myself as a doctor, as a grown up, and I said, okay, I could do all of that. I know I could do it. I could go there and I could do the things exactly the way they want me to, and I just saw myself in the future doing it and feeling empty and hollow and not myself. And I was just like, oh, I don't want to disappoint my parents. I really don't. But that was the first time probably in my life where I realized, I think this is kind of a necessary step to growing up. I got to know when to say this is right for me, and I don't care if you don't understand it. I don't care. I have to do this because this is right for me, because I'm going to have to live with. I just got a flash of a very upsetting adulthood that I'm heading for if I do this, if I take this road to please you and don't take this road that I know I need to go on, I'm going to be upset later, and then I won't be able to blame you later. I can only blame myself because I should have taken the road to please me. You know what I mean? I am an artist. I have to say it out loud now. Like that's the closest I've to my friends who had to come out to their parents. I am gay or bisexual or whatever. You know what I mean? Right. But it felt like that. Like, no, this is who I am. This is not just a thing I do in the corner with a sketchbook. This is the way I want to live my life. This is who I am smart too. Yeah. I get good grades. Yeah. That's not what I'm going to hang my hat on, though. I make pictures. I tell stories. Yeah. And even if I got a PhD in medicine, I'd quit and go tell stories.
Right. Something that is only it's radical in 2024, but if it ever happens, it'll be like, that was radical. I hope we get to a point where, because everybody talks about college ready, college ready, college ready.
Mhm.
I remember reading an article of a girl who was like college ready. She was very smart, got straight A's in high school, but
Mhm.
she decided to become a mechanic. She decided to go into the trades. I hope we generally get to that place in our society where even if you're smart enough to go to college, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Don't have
Or
to.
if you, even if you're smart enough to become a doctor, if that's not what you want to be, like,
Absolutely.
like
I mean,
you can be
again,
smart and do other things.
again, I go back to Star Trek. Like that, Star Trek already nailed all that stuff. So like, you become a self-actualized human being based on what you want to have in your brain, and it's all there available to you. You don't have to pay a tuition. You know, in Star Trek, you don't have to pay a tuition to become knowledgeable at anything. Vast centuries and centuries of knowledge are there, and we're close. I mean, we have an internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have way more information at our disposal than the Library of Alexandria ever had, right?
Yeah.
And you could pull it up on a device this small, right? Or just sit in a coffee shop with your laptop or whatever, and teach yourself a lot. You can become very knowledgeable without ever having to pay a cent of tuition if you want to. You have to have, to me, it's more about the curiosity. To me, the real reward is not a degree. I mean, a degree is just a paper saying that you spent a certain amount of time with somebody ostensibly teaching you. Sure.
Yeah.
But the real reward of education is the fulfilling nature of having your curiosity rewarded, right? In my opinion. And that's what I'm all about. I just want to expand this little 3 pounds of fat between my ears. I want to make the most of it, you know. Yeah. But I do have an identity. Like if one thing comes above, like whatever, like everybody has a, how do you identify, right? What are you really at the core? If you can only keep one aspect of you and you had to ditch all the rest, what would you keep? Well, I'm sorry, I got to keep artist. You know, not even it's not even like, I'm also a hacking musician on the side. So maybe second place would be musician. But I already had that conversation with myself. It's like, you're going to have to choose, brother, one of the two. Right. And I choose art. I'd rather be deaf than blind, put it that way. I would rather be neither, but if I have to choose, I can't give up my art. You know, and so that was a thing. But my parents, once they realized that I'm not gonna, like, I'm willing to fight them on it, that I'm willing to risk being not respected by them. Once they saw I'm willing to walk to that line and I'm not flinching, they're like, oh, I think he's serious, honey. You know what I mean? You know what's funny though? The payback, of course. Once I got lucky and got into animation, and I got into animation at a lucky time, that my first gig, I ended up working on, 4 features that made a lot of money, Lion King, Pocahontas, Mulan, and Tarzan. And so when those movies started coming out, all of a sudden, my dad had passed away, but my mom was still around. And all of a sudden, here's your payback for all of the worry about whether I was going to be able to get mainstream respect in capitalist society. Well, it turns out we just hit a peak moment where my art was able to make a corporation very, very rich. Right. You know what I mean? And now you get to go brag to all your friends about your artistic son is doing something that is very respectable. You know what I mean? At least in your respectable, you know what I'm talking about, right?
And you're perfect. Yeah,
well, respectable. It made a lot of money for names, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think you need that to be respectable, but in their world,
yes,
right. Yeah. The Disney logo carries weight in their world,
right? Yes.
And so
since before they were born.
Right. And then I was 25. I bought my first house, and they're like, "Oh wow, so."
Oh, so you can adult. So okay, you could, because I think that's what they're really worried about. I think that's what they're really worried about taking care of yourself.
I'd say it's both. They're worrying about, can you keep a roof over your head, and also, I think deeper than that is, you're still a Black man in America. Are you going to be respected in a way that is sustainable, right?
Yeah.
But during my 20s, I was able to kind of assuage all that fear, courtesy of the Disney gig. You know what I mean? And that's not what it meant for me. The Disney gig for me was my gateway drug to filmmaking. That I love this like I love telling stories in moving pictures, but for them it was more like, oh my God, he's respectable.
This is the part where I list projects you worked on. You already listed some of them.
Oh, sure.
But the point is, somebody who looks like this has worked on something we love. So yeah, you already listed Lion King, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tarzan, The Road to El Dorado, Spider-Man, Eight Crazy Nights, and IMDb is sometimes wrong, so let me know. But
Sure,
anyway,
sure.
And I'm not gonna list everything. iRobot.
That's fine.
Let's see, The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, The Mummy, Tomb of Dragon Empire. Let's see, what's more? The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Riddick, and then some directing that you've done for your Snooki Erectile Championship. Pink and Blue, Two Hopeful Spencers, and 180.
Yeah, I like most of I think you got the majority of the VFX gigs in there. There are probably a few others. X-Men 2, X-Men 3.
Freddy vs. Jason.
Freddy vs. Jason. Oh God, I almost forgot about that one. And Snakes on a Plane, my crowning achievement.
Oh, nice. So is there anything notable that you want to say about any project, even if it's not on something I listed? Is there anything notable that you want to say about anything?
Well, I mean, each, like, obviously there are certain, sometimes they're tentpole gigs. You have, like, in my journey from just traditional animator to CG animator to like sort of combo VFX guy to writer, director, live action. There are certain things that, without that, I couldn't have gone to the next stage, So obviously, Lion King is always going to have a special place in my heart. That was my first actual real start to finish movie gig, right? And that was my gateway drug to falling in love with animation and movies in general. Without Lion King, a lot of stuff doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And if Lion King doesn't make the money it made, a lot of that stuff doesn't happen. I mean, there might not have even been the other movies if Lion King had tanked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Granted, it had Beauty and Aladdin before it to kind of already build up of, you know what I mean? Lion King didn't come out of nowhere. It was like, oh, Mermaid. Oh, we're interested. Okay, Beauty. Oh, wow, we respect you. Aladdin. Oh my God, you've made even more money than, you know what I mean? And then Lion King's like, now we can, now we're flexing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I came into the industry with that flex, and that's just timing. I can't even take credit for that. I just happened to be of that age when that was going down, right?
Yeah.
And then for me, Spider-Man 1 was my next big tentpole because that was my sort of. This is an old vintage video game called Frogger. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You familiar with Frogger?
I got to see it at the Video Game Symphony.
Oh, nice. And you just hop in, but you're trying to make it across the thing and you got to hop from a log, and sometimes you got to hop on an alligator and you got to get off the alligator before, you know what I mean? So my log of when I was the Disney thing turned into an alligator because I didn't. There was a point where it was like, okay, the meteor's going to hit. We didn't know the meteor was on its way.
Right.
And paper flipping animation was about to die and we didn't know it, right? I jumped from that alligator to a log just as the meteor was hitting.
Nice.
And Spider-Man was the log I landed on, and I had to quickly retool myself, reinvent what I was, get this software into me that I'd never gone to school for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And suddenly I'm a Maya guy. I have to like just walk and talk like a Maya guy. So this back to, remember we were talking about when we were kids, I got to just walk into this new group and talk like they talk.
Yeah.
I got to talk like a CG guy now. Okay. Yeah. Listen to them.
Yeah.
Listen how they talk like them.
Right.
And you probably have a couple of guests that I've probably worked with at Sony, like on your show, because I think I saw a few names like, I know him, I know them.
Yeah.
And I have all of them to thank for helping teach me how to be like them. You know what I mean? So then I would say,
really quickly.
Sure.
Have you seen there's like a social, like this creator who she was dressed up like God, and then like so I can't remember, it was just like a person, and they were like she asked God, she was like, oh, so did you make the dinosaurs meteor? And they were like, I thought you said meteor. And meteor. And they're just like, no, meteor.
I thought you wanted an actual meteor.
And he was like, no, I told you to make the meteor.
Oh, that's hilarious. No, I didn't see that.
Oh, that was a lovely little.
Oh, that's cute.
Thing. Yeah.
That sounds like something that you see like on Rick and Morty. Like they had that one episode with the dinosaurs who left when the meteor came. I'm trying to think of another. Well, Curious Case of Benjamin Button. We worked on that at Digital Domain. We got a VFX Oscar for that. So I should always say, anytime you work on anything that gets an Oscar, that's a milestone. You know, anytime I can drop an Oscar into a casual conversation, it's like, oh, I don't pull it out at every dinner party, but when I must, I don't always drop it. But when I do, it's going to be Benjamin Button, right? But all we did was work on like facial animation for that, you know. Brad Pitt, old man Brad is what we did, you know.
Yeah.
So but then
Leon
like
worked on that too.
Who? Oh, did Leon work on Button? That's probably okay. Because I'm trying to remember every single. You should probably like show me a list of everybody who you've had on as a guest, and we'll see like all the 6 degrees of separation, right?
Yes. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because I think I saw you on page. I think Greg Anderson was also in your right. Yeah. So Sony and Cinecite, I think, by works both. Yeah.
Do you know Lyndon Barrois?
Lyndon, both Digital Domain and where else?
I can imagine you two in a room together. Y'all are extroverted.
Oh, Lyndon? Oh, Lyndon's the man. As a matter of fact, he used to do these great things. Like he'd have like these poker nights, and like everybody, a whole bunch of brothers would just converge on Lyndon's place, and Harry Lennox would show up, and like, and it would be this whole. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, the last time I saw Lyndon, we both had a film in a festival, and like it was a Hollywood Real Film Festival, and he had one of his stop motions, and I had one of my CG shorts, pink and blue, right? And so yeah, Lyndon's doing his thing. I mean, but that's whatever. My big regret is that I think he was one of the Matrix sequels that he was souping on, and I had a moment. I was going to hop, like he had reached out to say, "Hey, are you available to work on Matrix 2 or whatever?" And I was like, "Oh." And then 2 seconds earlier, I got the call to work on Benjamin Button, and so whatever. It was one of those like kind of things where right 2 seconds, if you had made that call 5 minutes ago, we would have been working together. You know what I mean? That's back when the ratio of work to availability was there's more of that work going around. You know? So right. So anyway, but those are the relationships on a lot of those are the most important thing to me. Like some of them, like Spider-Man, so many relationships. That was a crucial nexus point of a lot of guys were starting to come into their own, and that's the perfect time to make friends in the VFX world. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's why, like, I love the fact that I can name drop all those guys that we're just talking about. Right around that time, that's when you had these VFX mixers and the bake-offs and all those things that would. Those relationships are still paying off. Now all those people are in the supervisory and like, you know, they have their own little shops and whatnot. But back then we were all just, hey, getting a job. You know what I mean? Lynn is a little bit probably farther along than I was. You know, he was already in it. He already had like the PJs and all that stuff going on before I even got into CG. You know what I mean?
Right. What do you love about animation?
Oh, what do I love about animation? Oh, that's not too difficult. Okay. Love that animation. Okay, well, I guess I should start with what I loved about drawing and painting first, because that was my first love. You know, I just call myself a storyteller now, and I'm a storyteller who uses many different tools. Whatever the job needs, that's a tool I use. But at the beginning of my life, the only tool I was introduced to was like a pencil and a crayon, you know, and a piece of paper. Right. So what I first loved about that, from the very first time I ever saw anybody draw, like I got goosebumps and realized that you can make something out of nothing. Just that, the fact that it's this weird witchcraft of magic, right? There's a blank piece of paper and now it's a rabbit or it's a whatever, you know what I mean? Or it's the Incredible Hulk or whatever. So that was my first. I'll never not be in love with the ability to make something out of nothing. Like something was up here, I closed my eyes and I made some marks and all of a sudden it's there. So that was stage one. Stage two is somebody said, guess what? If you do that on a lot of pieces of paper and flip them really fast, you can make it look like it's moving. And if you can make something look like it's moving, you can make it believable that it's acting. And if you can make something act, you can manipulate people's emotions to make them feel some sort of way. Yeah. You're saying I can make marks that can make people have feelings? What? This is next level sorcery. That was witchcraft. This is sorcery. You know, like you telling me I can make people feel whatever I want them to feel just by making pictures? What? And then that translates to, oh, there's software that can do that in a much more photorealistic way, where it looks like literally light is shining and cameras could move around. And now we're talking 3-dimensional sorcery. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then they're like, okay, that not enough for you? What if I told you you could just pick up a camera and just get an actor and you can tell the actors to make believe things, and you can film them in such a way that everybody watching what you filmed is having those feels. You know what I mean? So in all these cases, every tool that I've learned and put in my bag, it's really the same drug. I get off on putting something on a large surface that makes people have feelings about something.
Yeah.
That, if I were a doctor, if I were a lawyer, there's no way, no matter what I did, if I saved lives, that would be great. And granted, don't get me wrong, it's more important to save lives, obviously. Yeah. So kudos to every doctor out there, anybody working. If I were a teacher, it's more important to society to be educating young minds, right? Doctors and teachers are way more important than me. Nurses, firefighters, way more important than me. That's not even a debate. I'm conceding that. Way more important to the society that we live in. However, what's more important to me to be myself is that feeling that I can get if I can do something that you look at and I can manipulate how you feel and draw you into a world that I made. I'm going to die happier doing that than if I were a doctor who saved 1 million lives.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but I'm telling you the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that in our current society, what you said is true. But if we actually think about it, if there was no art during the pandemic, it would have been, what's that movie? Does it start with P? The P where it's all bets are off?
The Purge?
Yeah, the Purge. Like, people don't acknowledge how, like, people do not give credit to art. And then even like when I interviewed Larry Houston, he said like somebody did not unalive themselves because they wanted to see episodes of X-Men. Like that saved their life.
Wow.
And so, but I feel like people don't realize the impact, like regular people, we do. Because we obviously, we're in the club. But regular people don't realize the impact of art. And
I think they do. I think they do on a level, and they don't say it out loud. For example, when you discover the remains of an ancient civilization, archaeologists, what do we put in museums? We put their art in museums. That's what we preserve of the past. We put that on a pedestal to be like, look at the stuff the ancient Greeks or the ancient Assyrians created. You know, if you ever walk through a big museum, the Impressionists, look at their work. So there are enough people who understand the importance of art to a society. Look around you. Look look behind you and look behind me. Everything, whether it's just design, fashion, architecture, illustration, film, TV, all of the above. Life would not be even it wouldn't be a millionth of the enjoyment we get out of life if artists were not making art in our society. It's what colors there's a great, I can't remember who made this quote. Art is a way that we decorate space. Music is a way we decorate time. You know what I mean? Yeah. I love that because without art, space is just empty space. Without music, time is just passing time. You know what I mean? But because of art and music, we are able to enjoy our existence on a level that no other species is capable of doing. In my opinion, it's not just because we have big brains that makes us, maybe like this very highly evolved, species. And some days I can argue like, well, maybe we're not that highly evolved. You know what I'm saying? Right. We're just hairless apes with nuclear weapons. But we are also hairless apes that can make art. You know what I mean? And to me, oh my God, a world with no art, a world with no music. I don't know, man. Do I want to live in that world? I don't care if we cure every disease. What's the point of curing every disease and there's no art to enjoy? Right. We could live forever, but there's no music to listen to. What? Right? I'm like, if you're saying, what's the trade-off? If you say, here's your Faustian bargain, you get to live forever, but there's no art and there's no music. The world is just white and gray and silent, but you get to live forever. Would you want that? Would you take that deal? That's something to think about.
I mean, I wouldn't take it even if there was art. Forever, like.
But now, if you told me you could live forever in this unending different levels of art, that we're going to create so many things.
We make different levels, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, but I'd rather
like,
take the finite existence with art though over the infinite without it any day of the week. You know what I mean? What was it? The movie Tuck Everlasting. I never have you seen it with the family that has the fountain of youth or whatever, and he's the father played by William Hurt is trying to talk the girl out of drinking. She's like, immortality is overrated, But I love one thing he says, that there's one line, I love it. It's, don't fear death, fear the unlived life.
That's very important.
That is such a wonderful quote, and especially for an artist.
Because some people are the living dead.
And as an artist, that's the biggest crime you could commit against yourself, is live the unlived life. I mean, it's scary. We all have imposter syndrome. We all think, oh God, am I ever going to be good enough to do that? I'm struggling now. There shows I'm pitching, there are movies I want to make, and it's going to be a long road to try to name your capitalistic entity that it's worth investing X million of dollars in something that's my idea, right?
Yeah.
And some days I wake up and I'm like, is this even worth trying? Is this worth it? And then I remind myself, dude, there's another alternate reality where you're this doctor and you're waking up saying, I got to do another day at the hospital. And you're wishing you could be a creator. You're wishing you had a chance to try to pitch that show. You're wishing you had a chance to try to struggle to get your little independent horror movie made. You're a successful doctor and you're pissed off because you can't do the thing that you're complaining about right now. Yeah. So don't be that way. Yes, it's going to be hard. It's always hard. Anything worth doing is hard. Right? But at least if I'm going to live a life that's got some difficulties that I got to get over, I'm going to do it as an artist. And I'll take that bargain hands down any day of the week.
So this question makes a lot more sense now that I know you. But how did you become a shop steward so early in your career?
She's like, oh, now I know the answer to this question.
I'm like, I wrote that yesterday, but I'm like, it makes sense.
Now that I see what a raving big mouth Marxist you are. I mean, I was shop steward and president of the local. So you're talking about when I was at not just Disney Animation Studio, but their Orlando, Florida satellite. That's where that happened. Okay. The majority of my time with Disney was spent there. I only came out here to LA during Tarzan production. Okay. But from Rescuers Down Under through Mulan, it was Orlando, Florida. And as you know, obviously Orlando is not LA, right? Jurisdictionally speaking, they had no real reason to make that a union studio. And at the beginning it was not. When they first broke ground or whatever in 1989. And the Animation Guild here, of which I'm a member, had no power to say, well, there has to be a baseline level of treatment for those artists that you hire in your Orlando studio. It might as well have been India. You know what I mean? Yeah. As far as they're concerned, they can do whatever they want. Florida's a right to work state, right?
Right.
So, however, the law also says if 15 or more people get together, sign cards to IATSE saying we want to be represented by IATSE, IATSE, the guild. For those of you who are listening who don't know, International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. And they cover everything from editors to whatever, right? We decided, guess what? We looked across to our brothers and sisters in LA. We looked to lots of other studios and realized we're working on the same products. Our labor is creating the same level of profit as the labor of somebody working 3,000 miles away. So why at that time were we getting paid half of what the scale was for an artist in LA, And so, but the only way you can actually bring those grievances respectfully to even have a chance of having them heard is you must do it collectively. We signed the cards, and in an election, people had to put forth who do we want to be the big mouth that gets to go and say these things out loud? Well, everybody looks around like, who's got the biggest mouth in their room? It became this like, how those games where it's like whoever wants to do it step forward and then everybody steps back.
Right.
Except for the one that was me. I'm the one who didn't step back, and I was like, oh, so James, you're nominating yourself for president? I completely identify with Christian Smalls, who's like, in Staten Island, Amazon.
Yeah.
Like I was the Christian Smalls of that moment. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, fine, if this is what we got to do, let's do it. And then I flew
Yeah.
out here to LA. I sat in on some of their negotiations. I met with a lot of other, like we went to the big IATSE conventions. I met with a lot of grizzled old union leaders, you know what I mean? And tried to catch myself up on history of not only labor agreements in Hollywood, but just the labor movement in general. It was a great introduction to, this whole history of workers trying to get dignity from capitalists is there's a lot of history to unpack here.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. There were massacres. People put their lives on the line to try to fight for people. There's the triangle, the fire, the shirtwaist. You know what I'm talking about? Like there are people who locked their employees in a burning building because they didn't want them leaving too early or whatever. And then those same guys who were held liable for all the deaths in that fire got another loan to start another building, another factory. I mean, it's amazing that over the course of their being workers, how much workers have had to struggle and fight just to be treated with a baseline of dignity.
Right.
And so when elders started schooling me, to quote Run DMC, next time someone's teaching, why don't you get taught? It's like that. And that's the way. So somebody was teaching, and so I got taught, and I learned the history of the labor movements.
And how old were you at this time?
I'm like 24, 25 at this point. And that sounds so young now because I'm like, oh my God, that was like, it's literally half my age, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even less than half my age, and so, God, I was a kid, but I was old enough to understand what's fair and what's not fair. I was old enough to understand if you're making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, but then telling the employees whose product is making you that millions of dollars that you can't cover the cost for them to buy a house, something's wrong. You know what I mean? And so I started learning about corporate greed. I started learning about everything that we all know today because there's an internet. But I started that gig as a union president, as a shop steward before there was an internet. So I had to just get it the old fashioned way.
Yeah.
Word of mouth by word of mouth by word of mouth. Hey, read this, check it. So I'm like, oh my God. If there were today, I would have had that education in like a week.
Yeah. If somebody was producing a documentary about you, what would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your career in animation?
Oh my gosh.
And VFX.
Wow. Like a documentary about me. Like, pardon me. I don't know why my brain went to this thing. It was like that remix of Craig Mack's Flavor in the Ear with LL Cool J on it. And one of his lines was Hollis to Hollywood, but is he good? That would be the name of
Tony the Tiger.
He is great. That would be the name of my documentary. Hollis to Hollywood, but is he good?
That would be lit.
Right, and I'd have to feature LL in it because I remember riding the bus with LL back when we were all
nice
and poor and living in Queens. But definitely it would be I think the documentary would have to go through my learning how to be a part of all these different types of communities. Like I now consider myself more or less a chameleon, and that's probably been like one of the things that's kept me alive, so to speak, and learning piece by piece how to see myself as, because I'm an artist, I want to reach as many people as possible. But one of the best ways to ensure that you'll be able to reach as many people as possible is to be able to understand and speak the languages and connect to as many people as possible, which means you got to cross boundaries of culture, language, everything, right? You got to learn how people do what they do over there, and then learn how they do what they do over there.
Right.
And don't see it as foreign or alien. See it as another flavor of humanity that you love.
Another flavor in your ear.
Another flavor in the ear. And I think truly, if the artistic soul that burns within me, hopefully the desire to tell stories that I can share with everybody else, hopefully I would like to think comes from a genuine love for humanity, from all my brothers and sisters, no matter what you look like, no matter where you live, what color, what language you speak, your orientation, all of that, so I want to share that with all of them. So in my way, I would like to believe that the documentary would make the case for why it was the right choice for me not to become a doctor. The first real choice that I ever faced in my young life. That's the should he have been this, or did he make the right choice? There's only 2 doors to go through, right?
To provide a little bit of validation, I think even in this interview, you have proven that of what you are wondering. Like, it's very evident through your story that is who you are.
Well, I mean, part of my brain always is like, but I wonder though, in that alternate reality, that sliding doors, like, is Dr. Me having a better time right now?
Probably not. Probably not. You already know.
Well, part of me said, you know what was going to happen? Like, I become a doctor and I realized, oh, but I still have to create. So I could go into cosmetic surgery. Then I would become like this hot cosmetic surgeon that all the models want to.
You would be hot in the BBL era.
But then at the end of that day, like, how fulfilling would that really ultimately? Yeah, I could sculpt faces, and maybe I would do it for people who are disfigured from accidents or something like that, and I could really help people get back their face. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that would be my equivalent of doing portraits. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
Right? Maybe. But I'm still no. I'm sticking with this. I'm going to stay in this. This universe is the right one.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to connect with you on social media or connect with you in any way,
sure. Yeah, like obviously, I have a production shingle. We're redoing the website as we speak, but Paper Tiger Films is my production company. But on Instagram, it's funny. My first love, as you know, is drawing. So I use my Instagram account as a way. Whenever I sit in on a figure drawing session, I'll just take snaps of my sketchbook. So Instagram ends up being my sketchbook repository. But I'm Plaster of Paris on Instagram. Like 2 R's, Parris, Plaster of Paris. Of course, like nobody even remembers what Plaster of Paris even is, but it's okay.
I'm at least like auditorily familiar now. Can I explain it?
Like,
no.
Like if you ever do you remember like paper mache or things like that?
Okay,
like, it's that kind of stuff. Yeah. But nobody does that anymore. Nobody makes paper mache plaster. You know, like, does anybody do that as kids?
I feel like people still do it.
Do they? Oh, okay. Maybe they do. I just always think they're just on an iPad.
I mean, they would have to go to like the library or like something, but not at their house.
Like a special craft thing, right?
Right, or a camp. Yeah.
Yes, it's summer camp. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Are you kidding? You give me a chance to talk about art and all the things I love about being a creator. Are you kidding? I'll do that all day long.
So again, thank you, and to everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real. Comment and tell me how you feel. Subscribe to Seal the Bell, sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.